The sharp crash of a shattered wine glass brought the entire coastal California restaurant to a dead halt. Every patron turned to look at our corner table. My husband Nathan sat perfectly still while his 29-year-old mistress, Brittany, wiped a fake tear from her cheek. She had just announced to his entire wealthy family that I was suffering a severe psychotic break and needed to be institutionalized. Nathan thought this public humiliation would shatter me. He thought his fabricated medical narrative would force me into a quiet divorce and leave me destitute. What he failed to realize is that as a senior healthcare compliance auditor, I catch medical fraud for a living, and I had already read his fake psychiatric report 2 days ago. My name is Wendy. I am 34 years old, and I am about to tear his world apart. Before I reveal exactly how I dismantled his lies, drop your age in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe to Sarah Told Stories because you will want to hear every single detail of this payback. The dining room smelled of expensive roasted sea bass and ocean salt, but the air at our table felt thick and suffocating. Lucille, my image-obsessed mother-in-law, reached across the white linen tablecloth and squeezed Brittany by the hand. Lucille offered a deep theatrical sigh of relief. "Thank you for stepping in, Brittany," Lucille said, her voice projecting just loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Nathan could not handle her clinical instability on his own anymore. "We are just so grateful you rescued him from this nightmare." I sat there staring at the untouched food on my plate. My chest tightened, but I forced my breathing to remain shallow and rhythmic. I bit the inside of my cheek until a faint metallic taste filled my mouth, locking my expression into a blank, frightened stare. Heather, my sister-in-law, leaned over and slid my crystal goblet of red wine far out of my reach. Her manicured nails tapped against the glass. "You really should not be mixing alcohol with those heavy antipsychotic medications, Wendy," Heather sneered, offering a smile that carried the sting of a physical slap. "We all know it is just not safe for someone in your precarious condition." Brittany lifted her chin, looking at me with pure, unearned triumph. She launched into a rehearsed speech about borderline personality traits and manic episodes. I listened closely to every single syllable falling from her glossy lips. I recognized the clinical phrasing immediately. She was reciting a boilerplate mental health article pulled straight from a basic internet search. They were orchestrating a character assassination right in the middle of a Michelin star restaurant. They wanted a hysterical reaction. They wanted me to scream, to throw my plate, and validate their twisted story so Nathan could justify stripping me of my home. Instead, I lowered my head and let my hands shake just enough to make them feel invincible. Let them bask in their manufactured victory. Let them think they had cornered a fragile, broken wife. Just 48 hours ago, I sat alone in the dark of our beach house, staring at the glowing screen of Nathan's unlocked tablet. I found the digital file they created. I found the forged signatures and the stolen medical credentials they planned to use against me. They thought they engineered the perfect trap. They had no idea they just handed a federal crime directly to an auditor. Exactly 48 hours before that shattered wine glass brought the restaurant to a halt, I was sitting in the suffocating darkness of our California beach house. The rhythmic crashing of the Pacific Ocean echoed through the open bay windows, mingling with the deep, steady breathing of my husband sleeping in the master bedroom. He was resting peacefully, unaware that the foundation of our 6-year marriage was about to splinter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Nathan always left his work tablet charging on the sprawling granite kitchen island. For the past 3 weeks, he had been intensely guarding his digital devices, shielding his screen whenever I walked past, and holding his phone face down on the dining table. A wife notices those subtle microscopic shifts in behavior. A wife notices the sudden password changes, the hushed phone calls taken out on the chilly balcony, and the frequent unexplained late evening meetings in Silicon Valley. I walked barefoot across the cold hardwood floor, guided only by the pale moonlight filtering through the plantation blinds. I approached the island and picked up the sleek device. The metal felt like ice against my palms. I swiped my finger upward on the smooth glass. The passcode prompt appeared, demanding entry. Nathan was a creature of profound, arrogant habit. He utilized his own birth date combined with the founding year of his biotech startup. The screen unlocked instantly, welcoming me into his hidden digital world. I braced my core for the predictable, agonizing sting of infidelity. I fully expected to find expensive hotel receipts scattered across his email inbox or late-night text messages sent to a much younger woman. I prepared my heart to see explicit photos of a mistress, confirming my worst suspicions. Instead, my eyes landed on a newly downloaded file sitting directly on his home screen. The document title was a sterile string of dates, followed by my full legal name. My thumb hovered over the glowing screen. A strange, creeping chill washed over my shoulders, traveling down my spine as I tapped the icon. The document expanded, filling the display with a stark white background. My breath caught sharp and jagged in my throat. Staring back at me was the official crest of the exact healthcare network where I serve as a senior compliance auditor. It was a formal psychiatric hold evaluation report. I read the clinical notes detailing a patient who was exhibiting severe manic episodes, prone to erratic, unprovoked outbursts, and presenting a clear, imminent danger to herself and her surroundings. The patient described in those chilling paragraphs was me. My eyes darted to the bottom of the digital page, seeking the authorizing medical signature. It bore the printed name and digital stamp of Dr. Eris Thorne, a prominent psychiatric specialist operating within our own network. My pulse hammered against my ribs, sending a rush of cold sweat prickling along my hairline. I had never met Dr. Thorne. I had never stepped foot inside his psychiatric clinic or spoken to him on the phone. Nathan and his mistress had not just fabricated a convenient story about my mental health to share with his judgmental family. They had meticulously forged a federal medical document utilizing stolen physician credentials. The sinister objective crystallized in my mind with terrifying clarity. Nathan did not merely want a clean divorce. California operates as a community property state, meaning I was legally entitled to half of everything we built together, including this expansive, multi-million-dollar oceanfront estate. He wanted to bypass the standard equitable division of assets. By establishing a documented medical history of severe psychological instability, he was laying the legal groundwork to have me involuntarily committed or deemed entirely unfit to manage my own finances. He was actively planning to strip my assets, steal the house, and lock me away in a quiet white room while he funded a luxurious new life with Brittany. A profound wave of panic threatened to shut down my nervous system, but 7 years of rigorous corporate training stepped in to steady my shaking hands. I am a compliance auditor. I dissect fraudulent data and dismantle liars for a living. I leaned closer to the glowing screen, zooming in on the diagnostic billing codes attached to the fake psychological assessment. I stared at the specific alphanumeric sequence. A sharp, cold smile broke across my face in the shadows of the kitchen. The criminals had made a microscopic, fatal error. The psychiatric condition listed on the evaluation was tagged with an outdated ICD-10 medical billing code. The specific numeric string they typed had been officially retired and replaced by the Federal Registry over 2 years ago. A random person searching the internet for medical templates would never know the difference. They would copy and paste the text, assuming it looked sufficiently official. But a senior compliance officer, whose entire career revolves around verifying the strict accuracy of those exact codes, spots the discrepancy in a fraction of a second. They had forged a highly sensitive legal document using obsolete data. The foundation of their lie was fundamentally flawed. I did not confront him. I did not march into the master bedroom, flip on the lights, and demand a confession from the man plotting my institutional destruction. I moved with silent, deliberate precision. I retreated to my locked home office and retrieved an encrypted flash drive from the bottom drawer of my desk. I plugged a covert adapter into the tablet and copied the entire fraudulent PDF onto my secure storage. I reviewed the file metadata, capturing the exact time and date the document was modified on his specific device. I pulled the digital footprint linking the file directly to his local home network IP address. When the transfer finished, I carefully deleted my access history, clearing the background cache to ensure the device showed zero evidence of my midnight intrusion. I placed the tablet back on the granite counter, positioning it exactly parallel to the edge, just as I had found it. I walked back to the guest bedroom and lay awake until the sun crested over the churning ocean, listening to the man in the next room who was actively planning to erase my existence. The memory dissolved as the harsh glare of oncoming headlights pulled me back to the present moment. I gripped the stitched leather steering wheel of my sedan, driving north along the winding Pacific Coast Highway. The humiliating family dinner was finally behind me. I had played the part of the fragile, trembling wife to flawless perfection. Nathan and his toxic family were likely still sitting at that upscale restaurant, toasting their perceived victory with expensive champagne. They firmly believed their coordinated character assassination had broken my spirit. The thick coastal fog rolled over the dark highway, dampening the sound of the engine. My mind raced through the next phase of the operational timeline. I needed them to feel invincible. I needed Nathan to act on his immense arrogance, because an enemy who feels untouchable always neglects their defensive perimeter. A red traffic light glowed through the mist, forcing me to bring the car to a halt at a deserted intersection. The silence inside the cabin was broken by a sharp metallic buzz emanating from the center console. I glanced down. The screen of my phone illuminated, displaying a high-priority notification from my primary banking application. I picked up the device and swiped open the secure message. The text was clinical and brief. It informed me that a unilateral security freeze had just been enacted on all marital joint checking and savings accounts. The block was initiated by the primary co-signer, citing emergency asset protection protocols. Nathan had not even waited until the morning. He launched his financial warfare before the valet could even retrieve his car from the restaurant. He was leveraging the fake medical narrative right this very second, claiming to the bank that his unstable wife was exhibiting reckless, manic spending habits. He severed my access to our shared wealth, attempting to starve me out of the marriage overnight. He expected me to check my balance panic at the sight of the zero available funds and come crawling to him for a meager settlement just to buy groceries. The traffic light turned green. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pressed my foot firmly against the accelerator. The engine roared, cutting through the heavy California fog. Nathan thought he was closing a steel trap around my neck. He was about to find out that trying to financially starve a corporate auditor is like trying to drown a fish. The California sun cut through the heavy ocean mist, casting long, pale shadows across the vaulted ceiling of the master bedroom. I woke to the distinct sound of Nathan closing his leather briefcase in the hallway. He hummed a low, cheerful tune as he walked down the stairs. The sound sent a fresh wave of cold clarity coursing through my veins. A man only hums like that when he thinks he has won. I remained still, listening to the heavy oak front door shut and the low rumble of his sports car fading down the driveway. He had frozen the joint accounts last night, leaving me with zero access to our shared wealth. His call to the bank utilized the forged medical narrative, portraying me as a severe liability, exhibiting reckless, manic spending. He expected me to wake up, check my phone, and spiral into a desperate panic. I threw off the silk sheets and walked down to the sprawling chef kitchen. I needed to feed his arrogance. An arrogant adversary stops checking for traps. I opened my laptop and pulled up a digital template for my personal checking account. I altered the numbers meticulously, draining the displayed balance down to a pitiful $300. I printed the falsified document, crumpled it slightly to simulate distress, and smoothed it back out. I left it sitting in plain sight on the gleaming marble island, right next to the expensive espresso machine Nathan used every single morning. When he returned home, he would see it. He would assume I had printed it in a frantic panic, trying to figure out how to survive. He would look at that pathetic $300 balance and feel an intoxicating surge of dominance. He thought he had starved me into submission. He thought cutting off my access to the marital funds meant cutting off my oxygen. But Nathan never truly understood what a senior healthcare compliance auditor actually does. He viewed my career as standard mid-level corporate bureaucracy. He never bothered to ask how I spent my days or how the corporate penalty structure functioned. When I uncover systemic billing fraud within regional hospitals, my network recovers tens of millions of stolen dollars. My employment contract includes a strict compliance bounty. A significant percentage of those recovered funds flows directly to me as a performance bonus. 7 years ago, before I even met Nathan, I established an independent limited liability company registered in Delaware with offshore banking routing. I channeled every single performance bonus into that secure, untraceable entity. I did not hide it to deceive him. I did it because my father taught me to always maintain an impenetrable financial fortress. I sat at the kitchen counter and logged into my encrypted proxy server, the screen illuminated with pristine columns of data. Sitting quietly in that shielded account was over $2.5 million in liquid, untraceable capital. I was not destitute. I was a fully funded private army, ready to wage a quiet, devastating war. I closed the laptop, securing my hidden war chest. It was time to put on a show for the spectators. I pulled my hair into a messy, uneven knot and slipped into a faded, oversized sweater. I drove my sedan to a busy upscale coffee shop in the heart of our coastal town. As I pulled into the parking lot, my eyes scanned the outdoor patio. Sitting 2 tables away from the entrance, hiding behind a pair of oversized designer sunglasses, was Heather. Nathan had dispatched his sister to monitor my movements. She sat, sipping a matcha latte, her phone resting face up on the table, ready to report my every stumble. I walked inside, keeping my shoulders hunched. The scent of roasted espresso beans and baked pastries filled the bustling room. I stepped up to the counter and ordered a plain black coffee. The barista smiled and stated the total. I pulled out my sleek silver debit card, the very card tied to the joint account Nathan had frozen hours prior. I inserted the chip into the reader. The machine beeped a harsh, discordant tone, declined. I forced my eyes to widen. I let out a soft, breathless gasp, pulling the card out and wiping the chip on my sweater. "Please try it again," I whispered, projecting a perfect pitch of desperate confusion. The barista ran it a second time. The machine flashed a bright red error message. "I am so sorry, ma'am," the barista said, casting a sympathetic glance. "The bank is rejecting the transaction." I stepped back from the counter, bringing a trembling hand to my mouth. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I apologized profusely to the growing line of customers behind me, my voice cracking with manufactured shame. I hurried out of the shop, empty-handed, pushing through the glass doors. I cast a frantic, humiliated glance toward the patio. Heather was already typing furiously on her phone, a smug, satisfied grin stretching across her face. She was texting her brother, confirming that the financial starvation was working perfectly. I climbed into my car and locked the doors. The trembling vanished instantly. My posture straightened. I wiped the fake tear from my cheek and allowed a sharp grin to surface. Heather had consumed the performance, hook, line, and sinker. I navigated away from the coffee shop, driving straight toward the towering glass buildings of the financial district. A war requires generals, and I needed the most ruthless litigator on the coast. Mitchell Reed was a corporate shark known for tearing apart hostile takeovers and crushing arrogant executives. I parked in the underground garage and took the private elevator to his corner office. Mitchell reviewed the timeline I presented, laying out the forged psychiatric report, the frozen assets, and my untraceable offshore capital. He leaned back in his leather chair, tapping an expensive pen against his desk. "Your husband thinks he is playing chess," Mitchell said, a low chuckle rumbling in his chest. "But he just handed you the board, the pieces, and the rulebook. We can file an emergency injunction to unfreeze the accounts today." "Do not touch the accounts," I instructed, my tone echoing the frigid air conditioning of the suite. "Let him believe the siege is successful. I want him feeling untouchable. When a predator thinks the prey is dead, they stop checking their blind spots. We wait for him to officially file that forged medical document into the court record. The moment he submits it under penalty of perjury, we snap the trap shut." Mitchell nodded, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a flawless legal ambush. I signed the retainer agreement, wiring his hefty fee directly from my offshore LLC. I walked out of the law firm feeling a potent surge of control. The foundation of Nathan's trap was already crumbling beneath his feet. I stepped out of the freezing corporate lobby and into the warm California afternoon. Palm trees swayed gently along the manicured sidewalks, but my focus remained locked on the digital battlefield. I retrieved my phone from my purse, intending to review my upcoming audit schedule. Instead, the screen erupted with a continuous stream of rapid notifications. My device buzzed frantically against my palm, vibrating with dozens of alerts from multiple social platforms. I frowned, tapping the first notification icon. It linked directly to an overarching network of mutual friends, colleagues, and local coastal elite circles. The feed refreshed, loading a newly published video that was already accumulating hundreds of shares and thousands of views. I pressed play, holding the speaker close to my ear to hear the audio over the rushing street traffic. Brittany appeared on the screen. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Nathan's expensive sports car, wearing oversized sunglasses and dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She had expertly crafted her appearance to project profound vulnerability. The Mistress was broadcasting a tear-stained plea to the entire Silicon Valley community. She spoke with a trembling, practiced voice, claiming she was living in a state of constant fear. She explicitly named me, painting a horrifying picture of a severely deranged stalker ex-wife who was bombarding her with unhinged threats and erratic late-night visits. The performance was Oscar-worthy. She stared directly into the camera lens, stating she only wanted peace and safety for Nathan, who was bravely trying to navigate a nightmare scenario with a clinically unhinged partner. The video was a masterclass in digital defamation, designed to isolate me from every single social and professional connection I had spent a decade cultivating. I scrolled down to the comments section. Heather and Lucille had already flooded the feed with validating statements. They typed out fabricated anecdotes about my supposed manic episodes, confirming Brittany's lies and thanking her for her bravery. The comments from our mutual friends were rolling in fast, expressing shock, horror, and deep sympathy for Nathan. The societal execution was unfolding in real time. They were actively weaponizing public opinion to pressure me into a rapid, silent divorce. I stood on the bustling sidewalk watching the view count climb. They wanted me to break. They expected me to post a frantic, hysterical rebuttal, thereby proving their claims of my supposed instability. They had no idea they had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy them both. The digital execution played out across my phone screen with terrifying efficiency. Brittany sat in the passenger seat of Nathan's expensive sports car, adjusting her ring light to ensure the lone tear rolling down her cheek caught the bright California sun perfectly. She craved high society influencer status, a desperation radiating from her flawless makeup and rehearsed vulnerability. She decided my fabricated mental breakdown was her golden ticket to viral fame. "I just want to feel safe," Brittany whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with calculated precision. Dealing with a partner's stalker ex-wife who is experiencing a severe psychotic break is terrifying. We are changing our locks today. Beneath the video, the comment section mutated into a digital firing squad. Lucille typed lengthy paragraphs of manufactured maternal grief, thanking the young mistress for standing by her son during this harrowing ordeal. Heather chimed in immediately, claiming she had personally witnessed my erratic outbursts at family gatherings. The Silicon Valley elite thrive on scandal, and they devoured the false narrative instantly. My phone buzzed again, but not with incoming messages. It was the sound of doors slamming shut. Group chats vanished. Calendar invitations for charity galas, networking events, and weekend brunches disappeared from my schedule in rapid succession. Industry acquaintances who routinely asked for my compliance advice abruptly blocked my profile. The social isolation was swift, brutal, and undeniably effective. A lesser woman would have cracked under the crushing weight of the public humiliation. She would have logged on, typed a frantic defense, and begged her former friends to believe the truth. Engaging in a public shouting match was exactly what Nathan desired. He wanted me to appear frantic, desperate, and unstable, confirming the exact rumors his mistress was broadcasting to the world. Instead, I poured myself a glass of iced lemon water, sat at my glass desk, and treated their cyberbullying like a corporate audit. The condensation from the glass dripped onto my knuckles as I stared at the glowing monitor. Every post, every comment, and every shared link became a distinct, quantifiable piece of evidence. I utilized screen recording software to capture the dynamic feeds, preserving timestamps, usernames, and metadata with surgical precision. Brittany was not just cyberbullying a rival, she was publishing an undeniable, highly documented trail of defamation across state servers. She was handing me the exact financial damage calculations I needed for a 7-figure civil lawsuit. I organized the files into encrypted folders, categorizing each lie by the individual who typed it. My background in compliance taught me one crucial lesson. Gossip is just noise, but documented lies are actionable data. After the consciousment remember the speak druggle post invisible, the incoming email chime pulled my attention away from the digital archive. The sender was Mitchell Reed, The subject line simply read, "Settlement Proposal." I clicked the secure attachment and scanned the dense legal jargon. Nathan's attorney had drafted a coercive ultimatum designed to break my spirit entirely. The demands were breathtaking in their sheer arrogance. Nathan requested sole ownership of the coastal beach house, a full waiver of my right to any future spousal support, and unmitigated control over all joint financial portfolios. Buried in the final paragraph was the true extortion. If I refused to sign the surrender treaty within 24 hours, his legal counsel threatened to submit the psychiatric evaluation to a family court judge to formally declare me unfit. I dialed Mitchell immediately. He answered on the first ring, his tone laced with professional disgust. "They are attempting to strong-arm you with a fabricated evaluation, Wendy," Mitchell said, the rustle of heavy paper echoing through the line. "If we do not respond to this ultimatum, they will file the paperwork tomorrow morning. A judge might issue a temporary order based on the severity of those clinical claims." "Let them file it," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of any panic. "Ignore the settlement deadline entirely." Mitchell paused, the silence on the line hanging heavy. "If they enter that document into the official record, we have to prove it is fake rapidly, or you risk losing your legal autonomy. They are playing a very dangerous game." "They are handing us the rope," I explained, staring at the frozen frame of Brittany's viral video on my secondary monitor. "Submitting that file to a judge changes this from a messy divorce tactic into felony perjury. I want Nathan to swear under oath that the document is real. I want him to cement his own guilt. Do not send a single counteroffer." "You are walking a very tight wire, Wendy," Mitchell warned, though a hint of deep respect laced his words. "I will let the deadline expire at midnight. Ensure you secure the counter evidence before they reach the courthouse." I ended the call and grabbed my car keys from the marble counter. The social smear campaign and the coercive legal threats were merely distractions, smoke grenades thrown by a man who believed he held all the power. It was time to systematically dismantle the core of his trap. I bypassed the scenic coastal route, driving inland toward the sprawling medical complexes of the valley. The tires hummed against the hot asphalt as my mind reviewed the upcoming confrontation. Nathan had made a fatal miscalculation when he selected the physician to frame me with. He chose a prominent, highly respected specialist to make the evaluation look credible to a judge. He failed to account for my professional network and my deep understanding of healthcare protocols. I pulled my sedan into the private gated parking structure of an elite psychiatric clinic. The sleek glass facade of the building gleamed under the midday sun, a fortress of confidentiality and high-end medicine. Dr. Eris Thorne was renowned for his strict ethical standards and his high-profile clientele. He was not a man who tolerated discrepancies in his medical charts, let alone the theft of his federal credentials. I walked through the sliding glass doors, bypassing the standard reception queue filled with nervous patients. The sterile scent of antiseptic and expensive air freshener filled the pristine lobby. I approached the security desk, pulling a specialized identification card from my purse. I flashed my senior corporate badge to the head guard, ensuring swift, unquestioned access to the executive suites. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, the numeric display ticking upward as I formulated my exact opening statement. I held the encrypted flash drive in my pocket, feeling the cool metal against my fingertips. Nathan thought he had orchestrated the perfect character assassination. He assumed a compliance auditor would just roll over and surrender her life's work. He had no clue I was about to turn his stolen medical identity into a federal tripwire, and the man sitting on the other side of these doors was going to supply the match. I navigated my sedan away from the coastal highway, steering inland toward the sprawling medical complexes of the valley. The digital execution orchestrated by Brittany was a calculated distraction. While the Mistress sought internet fame and my in-laws reveled in their cruelty, they left the true structural flaw of their operation exposed. Nathan believed he held the ultimate trump card with the fabricated psychiatric evaluation. He assumed a compliance auditor would just roll over and surrender her life work rather than face a public mental health scandal. He failed to account for my professional network and my deep understanding of strict healthcare protocols. I pulled into the private gated parking structure of an elite psychiatric clinic. The sleek glass facade of the building gleamed under the midday sun, acting as a fortress of confidentiality and high-end medicine. Dr. Eris Thorne was renowned for his strict ethical standards and his high-profile clientele. He was not a man who tolerated discrepancies in his medical charts, let alone the theft of his federal credentials. I walked through the sliding glass doors, bypassing the standard reception queue filled with nervous patients. The sterile scent of antiseptic and expensive air freshener filled the pristine lobby. I approached the security desk, pulling a specialized identification card from my purse. I flashed my senior corporate badge to the head guard, ensuring swift, unquestioned access to the executive suites. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. The numeric display ticked upward as I formulated my exact opening statement. I held the encrypted flash drive in my pocket, feeling the cool metal against my fingertips. The heavy mahogany doors of the executive psychiatric suite stood at the end of a long, carpeted hallway. I pushed the door open, stepping into an office that smelled of rich leather and expensive cedar. Dr. Thorne sat behind his immense desk, reviewing a patient file. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a tailored suit that projected immaculate authority. He glanced up, his brow furrowing in swift annoyance at the unscheduled intrusion. I did not wait for him to demand an explanation. I approached his desk and placed a printed copy of the forged psychiatric hold evaluation directly over the file he was reading. I introduced myself, stating my role as a senior compliance auditor for the network that processes his insurance claims. His annoyance shifted to deep confusion. I told him to read the diagnosis. He picked up the paper, adjusting his silver reading glasses. The silence in the room stretched, pulling tight like a piano wire. I watched his clinical detachment shatter in real time. A deep flush of red crept up his neck, spreading to his cheeks. His hands trembled, causing the crisp paper to rustle loudly in the quiet room. He looked at the bottom of the page, his eyes locking onto the stamped signature. He stood up, pushing his heavy leather chair back. The chair rolled over the plush carpet, hitting the wall with a dull thud. "This is not my signature," Dr. Thorne said, his voice low and tight with raw anger. "I have never seen you before in my life. Who authorized this document?" I pointed to the diagnostic codes and the federal credential numbers listed beneath his fabricated name. "Someone stole your medical license number and your Federal Drug Enforcement Agency identifier," I explained, keeping my tone strictly professional. "My husband and his mistress manufactured this clinical assessment to force a highly favorable divorce and strip me of my assets. They used your prestigious reputation to legitimize their fraud." The doctor reached for his desk phone, his knuckles turning stark white. "This is a severe criminal offense," he stated, lifting the heavy receiver. "I am contacting the local authorities right now to report extreme identity theft." I reached across the polished wood and pressed my hand firmly over the receiver, disconnecting the line. I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of corporate authority I possessed. "Do not call the local police," I instructed. "A local investigation gives them a chance to claim a simple misunderstanding or a clerical error. It tips them off and allows them to erase the digital evidence on their personal devices. We cannot afford to give them a head start." Dr. Thorne stared at me, bewildered by my calm demeanor in the face of such profound betrayal. I opened my briefcase and retrieved a freshly printed legal document, placing it next to the forged evaluation. It was a sworn affidavit drafted with flawless legal precision by my attorney. I explained the strategy, detailing how my husband was preparing to submit the fake psychiatric report to a family court judge within 24 hours. If we report it now, it is merely a local dispute. But if we allow him to officially file that document under penalty of perjury, it elevates the crime exponentially. Submitting stolen federal credentials to a presiding judge constitutes felony wire fraud and severe perjury. I need the trap to spring shut on a federal level, where the mandatory minimum sentences will guarantee he never recovers. The doctor read through the affidavit. His eyes scanned the precise legal language. He recognized the tactical brilliance of the maneuver. The theft of his federal identification put his own medical license at risk, and he was eager to distance himself from the toxic fallout. He pulled a heavy gold pen from his breast pocket and signed his name across the bottom line, applying his official clinic seal to the paper. I now possessed a bulletproof legal weapon. The affidavit definitively proved the psychiatric hold was a cruel fabrication and cleared my mental health record before the battle even reached the courtroom. I thanked him for his cooperation, sliding the precious document into my secure briefcase. The lock clicked shut, echoing with finality. I stepped out of the clinic and into the bright California afternoon, feeling a surge of potent control. The sun felt warm against my skin. I had neutralized his primary weapon. I walked toward the parking garage, pulling my car keys from my pocket. As I reached my sedan, my secure phone rang. The caller ID displayed Mitchell Reed. I answered, expecting to hear an update on the rejected settlement offer. Instead, my lawyer sounded breathless, a stark departure from his usual predatory calm. Wendy Mitchell said, his voice echoing sharply over the secure line. Your husband did not just threaten to use the evaluation in family court. He escalated the timeline. He just executed a direct strike on your professional clearance. I stopped walking. The concrete floor of the garage felt unsteady beneath my boots. What did he do? I asked, gripping the door handle of my sedan to steady myself. He bypassed the legal system entirely, Mitchell explained, the urgency bleeding through his words. Less than 10 minutes ago, Nathan transmitted the forged psychiatric report directly to the chief compliance officer at your corporate human resources department. He sent an anonymous email claiming you are experiencing a severe psychotic break and handling sensitive patient data presents a catastrophic liability to the network. My breath caught in my throat. Nathan was not just trying to win a divorce. He was trying to sever my primary source of income and destroy my professional identity permanently. He knew that a compliance auditor flagged for severe mental instability would be instantly stripped of all security clearances. He wanted me jobless, penniless, and isolated. He wanted to ensure I could never rebuild my life. He thinks he just delivered the fatal blow. Mitchell continued. Human Resources is already convening an emergency review board. They are going to call you in, Wendy. They have to act on a document that carries a federal medical stamp. Let them call me in, I replied, my voice dropping to a cold, mechanical whisper. Nathan thinks he is burning my career to the ground, but transmitting a forged medical document across corporate servers violates severe federal statutes. He just handed us the exact digital footprint we need to bury him. The Pacific Coast Highway blurred past my windows, a ribbon of gray asphalt carving through the heavy coastal fog. The sudden escalation from my attorney felt like a splash of ice water, sharpening my focus to a razor edge. Nathan operated in the fast-paced world of biotech sales. He dealt in firm handshakes, expensive dinners, and smooth persuasion. He assumed the corporate world functioned on rumors and quick, reactive judgments. He lacked the fundamental understanding of how a rigorous compliance network truly operates. He thought emailing a forged psychiatric hold to my superiors would trigger an immediate, unquestioned termination. He viewed my career as a fragile house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest gust of scandal. He did not comprehend that my department was a fortress of strict federal regulations. In compliance, an email is not just a message, it is a digital fingerprint, a permanent record of intent. I parked my sedan in the subterranean executive lot of the Healthcare Network headquarters. The polished steel doors of the private elevator slid open, revealing the hushed, sterile environment of the executive suite. I bypassed my usual cubicle, walking straight down the corridor toward the glass-walled conference room. Inside sat Chief Compliance Officer Sullivan and the lead corporate counsel. Their expressions were grim, their postures rigid. A single printed document rested in the center of the dark oak table. I took a seat across from them, folding my hands neatly over my leather purse. Sullivan leaned forward, tapping a silver pen against the polished wood. We received a highly concerning anonymous transmission this afternoon, Wendy, Sullivan stated, his tone professional but laced with underlying tension. The sender provided a detailed clinical assessment suggesting you are an imminent danger to yourself and those around you. Handling protected patient data requires uncompromised stability. I did not flinch. My pulse remained slow and rhythmic. I reached into my briefcase and retrieved the crisp, freshly signed affidavit from Dr. Aris Thorne. I slid it across the smooth oak surface, placing it directly over the anonymous email printout. I suggest you read the sworn statement from the physician whose signature was forged on that evaluation, I replied, my voice steady and crystalline. My husband and his mistress manufactured that file to sabotage my professional standing. Sullivan adjusted his reading glasses, his eyes scanning the dense legal text of the affidavit. The tense atmosphere in the room dissolved instantly, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a corporate defense team. The lead counsel picked up the forged email printout, his jaw tightening. "This is not just a marital dispute anymore," the lawyer noted, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. The perpetrator transmitted a fabricated medical document into a highly secure corporate server network. I nodded, outlining the exact federal implications. Nathan used a fake email address, but he failed to mask his routing data properly. I requested the IT department isolate the transmission logs. Within minutes, the lead cybersecurity technician entered the conference room, holding a digital trace report. The anonymous sender IP address matched the exact localized network of the biotech firm where Nathan served as a senior sales executive. He sent the forged psychiatric hold from his own office desk. The corporate counsel laid out the trap. By pushing that file across state lines and into our secure servers, your husband committed felony wire fraud, the lawyer explained. Furthermore, utilizing a stolen physician credential to misrepresent a health condition constitutes a severe violation of federal health privacy statutes. He essentially gift-wrapped a federal indictment and delivered it to our inbox. Sullivan looked at me, realizing the sheer magnitude of the situation. "We can hand this over to the authorities today," Sullivan offered. "We can have federal agents waiting in his corporate lobby by sunset." I shook my head, keeping my expression entirely neutral. "A swift arrest terminates the game prematurely," I explained. "I need his arrogance to peak. I need him to believe his sabotage was a total success, prompting him to take further reckless actions in family court. I proposed a tactical maneuver. "I need you to suspend me," I instructed, watching their eyes widen in surprise. "Issue a formal, documented suspension of my duties, pending an internal investigation. Place me on administrative leave." Sullivan frowned, questioning the logic. "Why penalize yourself when we possess the undeniable proof of his fraud?" "Because a verbal threat carries zero weight in civil litigation," I countered. "I need tangible, documented financial damages. A formal suspension creates an undeniable paper trail of economic harm directly caused by his forged transmission. It transforms his petty sabotage into a multi-million-dollar tortious interference claim." The corporate counsel smiled, a slow realization dawning on his features. The strategy was flawless. The network would temporarily remove my access credentials, maintaining the illusion of a successful character assassination, while internally building a devastating lawsuit against Nathan. We agreed to the terms. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my skirt. I walked out of the glass conference room, deliberately lowering my shoulders and allowing my steps to falter slightly. My colleagues watched me exit the building, whispering among themselves, fully convinced the top auditor had just suffered a catastrophic professional collapse. I drove back to the sprawling beach house as the sun dipped below the Pacific horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across the water. The house was empty, echoing with the hollow silence of a fractured marriage. I poured a glass of sparkling water and set my phone on the granite kitchen island. The screen lit up almost immediately. A text message from Nathan appeared. I swiped open the notification. The words dripped with unearned triumph. "Heard you had a rough afternoon at the office. Looks like you are too unstable to work. Time to pack your bags, Wendy. I will be taking over the property." He thought he had severed my final lifeline. He firmly believed the fake evaluation had stripped me of my income, my reputation, and my home. I did not reply. I locked the screen and walked upstairs to the master bedroom. I pulled a single, cheap suitcase from the closet and began folding a few plain, unremarkable sweaters. I left the expensive designer dresses and the sparkling jewelry resting in their display cases. A truly broken, terrified woman would not have the presence of mind to pack her valuables. She would grab the bare essentials and flee. I intended to leave this house looking exactly like the victim they so desperately wanted me to be. The next morning arrived with a biting coastal chill. The fog rolled thick off the ocean, obscuring the pristine view from the living room windows. I sat on the edge of the sofa, dressed in faded jeans and a loose gray cardigan. The digital clock on the mantel ticked relentlessly. At exactly 9, the crunch of expensive tires sounded on the gravel driveway. I did not move. I waited for the inevitable breach. A key slid into the front door lock. The heavy oak door swung open, hitting the wall with a dull thud. The scent of heavy, expensive floral perfume wafted into the foyer. Lucille stepped over the threshold, wearing a pristine cashmere coat and a look of profound, victorious disdain. Heather flanked her, holding a stack of flattened cardboard moving boxes. They did not knock. They did not announce their arrival. They simply invaded the space, initiating a hostile, physical takeover of the property. The final phase of their trap was springing shut, entirely unaware that the jaws were closing around their own necks. The heavy oak front door banged against the interior wall. Lucille marched into the foyer, her designer heels clicking sharp and fast against the imported tile. Heather followed closely, clutching a stack of flattened cardboard moving boxes. The sudden influx of icy coastal air swept through the living room, carrying the pungent scent of Lucille's signature floral perfume. They did not knock. They did not offer a polite greeting. They crossed the threshold acting as if I had already ceased to exist. I sat on the edge of the linen sofa, clutching my oversized gray cardigan. My posture remained hunched, projecting the exact image of a defeated, hollow shell. Lucille paused in the center of the room, her gaze sweeping across the vaulted ceilings and the expansive ocean view framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows. "This space always felt so cold," Lucille remarked, running a manicured finger along the edge of the granite mantel. "Brittany has such a warm, vibrant aesthetic. She plans to bring in a specialized design team by the weekend. We need to strip out all these sterile, depressing tones." Heather dropped the cardboard boxes onto the glass coffee table with a harsh thud. "I told Nathan to burn the area rugs," Heather added, a smug smile stretching across her face. "You never had an eye for interior design, Wendy. It is a relief someone with actual taste is taking over the property." I let my lower lip tremble, gripping the soft fabric of my sweater. "You cannot just walk in here," I whispered, forcing a fragile, broken tremor into my voice. "This is still my home. The divorce is not even finalized. You have no legal right to touch my things." Lucille turned slowly, fixing me with a stare devoid of any maternal warmth. She reached into her leather handbag and pulled out a thick, folded legal document, tossing it onto the glass table right next to the empty boxes. "You truly are delusional," Lucille sighed, adjusting her cashmere coat. "Nathan activated the emergency medical power of attorney clauses early this morning. Given your documented psychiatric collapse and your recent suspension from the compliance board, a judge granted him temporary conservatorship over the marital real estate. He transferred the deed into a secure family trust." My eyes widened in manufactured horror. I stared at the paperwork, playing the part of a woman whose entire reality was crumbling. In truth, my internal radar pinged with sharp, cold satisfaction. Nathan had forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, using the fabricated medical report as his legal shield. He filed fraudulent documents with the county clerk to fast-track the property transfer. He thought he was locking me out of my own investment. Instead, he was formally, legally chaining his new family trust to the toxic, unregulated shadow loan he had secretly taken out against the equity. By forcefully transferring the deed, they assumed the staggering financial liability hidden beneath the floorboards. "Brittany is moving in on Saturday," Lucille continued, her tone dripping with unearned superiority. "She and Nathan need a fresh start, free from your toxic instability. You have until tomorrow afternoon to pack whatever cheap clothes you own and vacate the premises." Heather wandered toward the formal dining room, picking up small trinkets and inspecting them with blatant disgust. She stopped in front of the display alcove. Resting on the polished mahogany stand was an intricate, hand-painted porcelain vase. It was an antique heirloom passed down from my late father, a piece of deep sentimental value that always held a place of honor in my home. Heather picked it up, tossing it casually between her hands like a cheap plastic toy. "This thing is hideous," she sneered, examining the delicate blue glaze. "It looks like something you would find at a flea market. Brittany wants a minimalist aesthetic. This junk does not fit the vision." "Please put that down," I begged, letting a genuine note of panic enter my voice to sell the performance. "That belonged to my father. It is irreplaceable." Heather locked eyes with me. A cruel, sharp glint illuminated her features. She held the vase out over the hardwood floor. Her fingers opened. The porcelain shattered with a deafening crash, exploding into hundreds of jagged shards across the polished wood. "Oops," Heather laughed, brushing the dust from her fingertips. "Looks like you will not have to pack that one. I guess your hands were just too shaky to keep it safe." I gasped, pressing my hands over my mouth, shrinking back against the sofa cushions. The visual of the shattered heirloom provided the perfect catalyst for my theatrical despair. Yet, behind my feigned tears, my mind operated with ruthless precision. Heather thought she had just destroyed a priceless memory to assert her dominance. She had no idea I kept a certified $15,000 appraisal certificate for that exact vase securely locked in my offshore war chest. She had just provided me with undeniable proof of felony property destruction. The shattered porcelain was not a tragedy. It was a highly lucrative invoice I would present to a judge during the final execution. Lucille stepped forward, her expensive heels crunching over the broken fragments. Her gaze shifted toward the hallway, where the plush velvet beds for my 2 rescue dogs sat near the glass patio doors. The dogs were safely secured at a premium boarding facility across town, a precaution I took the moment I discovered Nathan's trap. "And regarding those miserable animals," Lucille stated, her voice dropping to a menacing pitch, "Nathan is filing a petition with animal control. A woman facing an involuntary psychiatric hold is entirely unfit to care for dogs. We are taking custody of them. Brittany loves dogs, and they will be much safer living here with a stable family." That was the cue. It was time to deliver the grand finale. I slid off the edge of the sofa, letting my knees hit the hardwood floor. I collapsed onto the ground, burying my face in my hands. I forced my shoulders to heave, letting out loud, ragged sobs that echoed through the spacious living room. "Please," I wept, my voice cracking under the weight of fabricated misery. "Please do not take my dogs. You took my job. You took my bank accounts. You are taking my house. I have nothing left. I am begging you, Lucille. Just give me a few more days. Let me find a small apartment. Please do not do this to me." My weeping fed their narcissistic egos like gasoline on an open flame. They stood over me, soaking in the sight of the successful, independent corporate auditor reduced to a trembling, broken mess on the floor. It validated every lie they had spun. It made them feel like untouchable royalty conquering a weak, uneducated peasant. "You brought this on yourself, Wendy," Lucille said, her tone laced with victorious finality. "Pack your bags. Leave the keys on the kitchen island. If you are not gone by noon tomorrow, I will personally have the sheriff drag you out." Lucille turned on her heel and marched toward the front door, her designer coat sweeping behind her. Heather followed, stepping carefully over the broken vase, casting one last triumphant sneer in my direction. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked. The sound of their luxury SUV starting in the driveway faded into the coastal fog. I stayed on my knees for exactly 10 seconds, ensuring they were well clear of the property line. Then the tears stopped. The trembling vanished. I lowered my hands from my face, my expression returning to a cold, calculated slate. I stood up smoothly, dusting the imaginary dirt from my faded jeans. I looked down at the shattered porcelain scattered across the floor, memorizing the layout for the police report I would eventually file. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom and retrieved the single cheap suitcase I had prepared the night before. I bypassed the walk-in closet filled with tailored silk suits, designer handbags, and expensive jewelry. A truly destitute, terrified woman fleeing an eviction would not have the presence of mind to pack her valuables. I needed them to walk in tomorrow and find my closet untouched, reinforcing their delusion that they had thoroughly destroyed my reality. I zipped the flimsy suitcase and carried it down the sweeping staircase. I placed my house keys squarely in the center of the gleaming granite kitchen island, exactly as Lucille had ordered. I took one final look around the expansive, sun-drenched living room. Nathan, Brittany, and his toxic family believed they had just executed a flawless, hostile takeover of a beachfront estate. They thought they were inheriting an empire. They had no idea they were moving into a financial slaughterhouse. By transferring the deed into their family trust, they legally chained themselves to the crushing, unregulated shadow debt Nathan had desperately hidden. I was not losing a home. I was handing them a ticking time bomb. I pulled my secure phone from my pocket and hailed a modest taxi to take me to my hidden downtown penthouse. The strategic retreat was finished. It was time to dive into Nathan's corporate ledgers and uncover the exact mechanism he used to fund his fraudulent life. I walked out the heavy oak front door of the coastal estate, carrying nothing but a flimsy synthetic suitcase. The ocean breeze whipped across the manicured lawn, carrying the sharp scent of salt and imminent rain. I did not turn around to cast a mournful gaze at the sprawling, multi-million-dollar property. I kept my head down, playing the part of the shattered, exiled wife for the benefit of any nosy neighbors watching from their windows. I reached the end of the long, paved driveway just as a faded yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. I climbed into the back seat, sinking into the worn upholstery, and instructed the driver to head toward the downtown financial district. As the taxi navigated away from the affluent suburban streets, the manufactured tension drained from my shoulders. The performance was over for the day. Nathan and his toxic family believed they had orchestrated a flawless eviction. They firmly thought they had outsmarted a senior corporate auditor by tossing my clothes onto the lawn and demanding my keys. They were entirely oblivious to the catastrophic legal snare they had just eagerly fastened around their own ankles. California real estate law is notoriously rigid regarding marital assets. Nathan could not simply snap his fingers and unilaterally remove my name from the property deed. To bypass my refusal to sign, he committed a breathtaking felony. He forged my signature on a quitclaim document, utilizing the fabricated psychiatric report to fraudulently establish emergency power of attorney. He submitted those falsified papers to the county clerk, transferring the title of the beachfront estate into a newly minted family trust. He named himself his mother Lucille and his mistress Brittany as the primary beneficiaries and managing trustees. By legally cementing their names to that family trust, they believed they were securing a fortune. They assumed they were inheriting a pristine oceanfront asset, free and clear. They never bothered to check the subterranean ledgers. 4 months prior, while conducting a routine security sweep of our joint financial profiles, I uncovered a terrifying anomaly hidden deep within Nathan's credit history. My husband had developed a taste for a lifestyle far exceeding his robust biotech executive salary. He wanted private chartered flights, vintage sports cars, and lavish gifts to keep his young mistress entertained. Traditional banks flagged his excessive debt ratio and denied his requests for additional credit lines. So Nathan turned to the unregulated shadows of the financial sector. He sought out a predatory private equity syndicate that specialized in high-risk mezzanine debt. He took out an immense, unregulated shadow loan, borrowing heavily against the equity of our coastal home. The terms of this specific loan were incredibly toxic, featuring a punishing compounded interest rate and a strict acceleration clause. If a single monthly payment bounced, the shadow lenders possessed the legal authority to bypass standard foreclosure proceedings and instantly seize the collateral. Nathan hid this catastrophic liability behind a maze of digital shell accounts, assuming his wife would never possess the technical skill to look beneath the surface. He thought he was a genius, transferring the house into a new trust to keep it away from my grasp. He failed to realize that corporate law dictates a harsh reality. When you forcefully assume ownership of an asset, you simultaneously inherit every single encumbrance tied to that property. By moving Brittany into the house and placing Lucille on the trust charter, Nathan legally bound his new family to the toxic shadow debt. They were no longer just stealing a house. They were volunteering to stand in front of a financial firing squad. The taxi merged onto the bustling interstate, leaving the coastal fog behind for the towering glass and steel skyline of the city. I paid the driver with cash and stepped out onto the crowded pavement. I did not look like a woman who commanded a hidden empire. I wore faded denim and a cheap gray sweater, pulling my flimsy suitcase along the concrete sidewalk. I walked 3 blocks until I reached a highly exclusive, luxury high-rise building. I bypassed the main lobby reception using a private service entrance reserved for elite tenants. I swiped a biometric keycard and stepped into a secure express elevator. The numeric display ticked upward, climbing to the penthouse level. The polished steel doors slid open, revealing a sprawling minimalist sanctuary. This hidden residence was funded entirely by the offshore limited liability company holding my seven-figure compliance bonuses. The penthouse featured panoramic views of the city skyline, pristine modern furnishings, and a dedicated technology room that served as my professional command center. I left the cheap suitcase near the entryway. I walked into the command center, pouring myself a glass of cold, sparkling water. I sat down at a custom-built desk outfitted with 4 curved, high-resolution monitors. I booted up the secure servers, shedding the identity of the broken wife entirely. I was back in my true element. I opened a shielded web browser and navigated to the social media profiles of my adversaries. I needed to monitor their movements and document their arrogance. Brittany had wasted zero time claiming her unearned throne. Her page was freshly updated with a continuous stream of celebratory photos and videos. She broadcasted her arrival at the beach house, recording herself walking through the grand foyer, holding a glass of expensive champagne. Nathan walked closely behind her, planting a kiss on her cheek while holding the keys I had left on the kitchen island. The digital gloating was nauseating, but highly useful. Brittany posted a subsequent video from the master bedroom closet. She was trying on the designer silk coats and imported Italian shoes I had intentionally left behind. She twirled for the camera, mocking my supposed mental collapse and bragging about her upgraded life. Lucille stood in the background of the video, holding a tape measure, discussing how quickly they could erase my presence from the architecture. They were publicly cementing their physical occupation of the leveraged property. Every single photo they uploaded served as time-stamped evidence of their hostile asset seizure, verifying their legal assumption of the toxic trust. I archived the videos into my encrypted legal dossier. Their social media celebration was a loud, obnoxious distraction. They were dancing on the deck of a sinking ship, entirely unaware of the water rushing into the hull. I closed the social media feeds and shifted my focus to the primary monitor. The shadow loan attached to the beach house was a lethal weapon, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. I stared at the raw data I had extracted from Nathan's home tablet. Even with the immense influx of cash from the predatory loan, the math simply did not align. The lavish expenditures documented on Brittany's social feed far exceeded the remaining balance of the borrowed equity. Nathan was hemorrhaging capital at a rate that defied logic. He was paying for luxury leases, exotic vacations, and high-end jewelry on a weekly basis. A senior auditor knows that when a lifestyle grossly outpaces verified income, the surplus funds are always being siphoned from an illicit source. Nathan was hiding another cash stream. He worked as a senior sales executive for a prominent global biotech corporation, handling lucrative equipment contracts with major research hospitals. He possessed high-level access to procurement budgets and vendor routing systems. If he was desperate enough to forge a psychiatric evaluation to steal a house, he was certainly desperate enough to manipulate his corporate ledgers. I cracked my knuckles, leaning closer to the glowing screens. The defensive phase of my operation was officially concluded. The toxic family was safely locked inside the beach house, eagerly awaiting their crown. It was time to switch to a ruthless offensive strategy. I initiated a series of deep decryption protocols targeting the virtual private network Nathan utilized for his remote corporate access. I was going to tear his professional existence apart layer by layer. I intended to follow the money until I found the exact artery he was bleeding dry, and I was going to expose a crime that would ensure he never saw the outside of a federal penitentiary. The silence inside my hidden downtown penthouse was broken only by the rhythmic hum of the custom server rack and the rapid clicking of my mechanical keyboard. 4 curved monitors illuminated the darkened room, casting a pale blue glow across my face. I sat upright in my ergonomic chair, shedding the persona of the broken wife entirely. I was back in my natural element, operating as a senior healthcare compliance auditor. The defensive maneuvers were finished. It was time to pivot to a ruthless offensive strategy and dismantle Nathan from the inside out. My husband operated in the high-stakes arena of biotech sales. He navigated a world of expensive client dinners, firm handshakes, and multi-million-dollar equipment contracts for regional research hospitals. He possessed high-level clearance over procurement budgets and vendor routing systems. He was a charismatic executive who relied heavily on his charm, assuming his polished exterior shielded him from rigorous scrutiny. That exact arrogance bred a fatal disregard for operational security. Nathan routinely synced his corporate laptop to our shared home network, utilizing a basic, poorly encrypted backup server hidden in the hallway closet of the beach house. He never imagined his wife would possess the technical proficiency to access those hidden archives. He assumed my job consisted of checking simple regulatory boxes. He failed to comprehend that tracking digital footprints and breaking through careless encryption is the foundational skill set of a senior auditor. I initiated a specialized decryption protocol targeting the backup archives I had mirrored before leaving the coastal estate. The progress bar crept across the screen, slicing through his rudimentary passwords. He used a predictable variation of his anniversary date and his college fraternity chapter to protect his deepest secrets. Within minutes, the digital lock snapped open. A sprawling labyrinth of raw corporate data flooded my primary display. I bypassed his personal correspondence and deleted internet history. I did not care about the mundane details of his infidelity. I navigated straight to the financial ledgers, the expense reports, and the vendor procurement logs. I overlaid his internal corporate spreadsheets with the metadata extracted from his shadow loan payments. The numbers began to tell a chilling, undeniable story. Even with the immense influx of cash from the predatory real estate loan, Nathan was hemorrhaging capital at an unsustainable rate. Maintaining Brittany and her relentless thirst for high society influencer status required an endless stream of liquid funding. He was paying for her luxury vehicle leases, securing reservations at exclusive resorts, and constantly upgrading her designer wardrobe. A standard executive salary could never support that level of unmitigated spending. He needed a hidden revenue stream. I applied a forensic algorithm to his vendor payout history, isolating any anomalies in the billing cycles. Red flags immediately illuminated across the screen. Nathan had manipulated his corporate procurement system with breathtaking audacity. He was actively defrauding his own biotech employer. The mechanics of his embezzlement were sophisticated, but ultimately traceable for a trained eye. Nathan had established a network of dummy vendor accounts registered to anonymous shell companies in Nevada. He fabricated invoices for fictitious consulting services, equipment maintenance, and logistical support. He leveraged his senior authority to approve these fraudulent payouts, routing hundreds of thousands of dollars from the corporate sales budget directly into his shielded holding accounts. He was treating his employer like a personal automated teller machine. The sheer scale of the theft elevated this situation from a bitter suburban divorce into a high-stakes federal thriller. He was committing systemic wire fraud, crossing state lines and utilizing corporate infrastructure to fund his illusion of infinite wealth. I leaned closer to the monitors, my eyes tracking a specific sequence of routing numbers. I followed the flow of the stolen capital as it exited the dummy LLCs and washed into his secondary checking accounts. The funds were immediately diverted to service the toxic shadow loan on the beach house, effectively using stolen corporate money to keep a roof over his new family. Then, a specific line item caught my sharp attention. It was an invoice for $50,000 categorized under Specialized Centrifuge Logistics. The payment was routed to an obscure vendor name that did not match any standard biotech equipment supplier. I ran a reverse lookup on the corresponding tax identification number and the associated banking destination. The vendor was not a logistics company. The routing number belonged to a bespoke, high-end jeweler located in the heart of Beverly Hills. It was the exact luxury jeweler who had custom-designed the flashy diamond engagement ring Brittany was currently flaunting across her social media profiles. The puzzle pieces snapped together with lethal precision. Nathan had not purchased that engagement ring with his own savings. He bought it using $50,000 of embezzled corporate funds, executing a fraudulent wire transfer across a heavily regulated financial network. The layers of his criminality perfectly aligned, providing me with a master key to his total destruction. I spent the next 3 hours compiling every single transaction, every fabricated invoice, and every corresponding routing number into a comprehensive encrypted dossier. I organized the data meticulously, formatting the evidence so a federal prosecutor could secure a grand jury indictment within a matter of days. The paperwork was flawless. I held the undeniable proof required to send my husband to a federal penitentiary for a very long time. My finger hovered over the mouse, ready to transmit the entire forensic package to the internal investigation division of his biotech firm. One click would initiate an unstoppable corporate cascade. Security guards would march to his desk, confiscate his devices, and escort him out of the building. The authorities would freeze his assets before sunset. I pulled my hand away from the mouse. Striking now would be a profound tactical error. If I exposed the embezzlement today, the biotech firm would terminate him instantly. He would lose his income and his professional standing, but he would still possess the forged psychiatric report. He could still attempt to use that fake medical document to manipulate the divorce proceedings and paint my whistleblowing as the vindictive act of a clinically unstable wife. A cornered animal is dangerous, and I refused to leave him with a single avenue of escape. I needed him to feel untouchable. I needed him to march proudly into a court of law and officially cement his own guilt. If he submitted that forged medical evaluation to a presiding judge, he would cross the threshold from local sabotage into felony perjury. I needed him to lock the doors of his own prison cell from the inside. I saved the encrypted dossier to an external drive and secured it in my desk drawer. The silence of the penthouse was abruptly pierced by the harsh ringing of my secure cell phone. The caller ID displayed the name of my corporate litigator, Mitchell Reed. I picked up the device, answering on the first ring. "They made their move," Mitchell stated, his tone radiating a sharp, professional intensity. "The county clerk just processed the filings." "Did he submit the evaluation?" I asked, keeping my voice cool and measured. "He did not just submit it," Mitchell replied, the sound of shuffling paper echoing over the line. "He filed a formal petition demanding total, undisputed control over all marital assets. He attached the fabricated psychiatric hold as primary evidence, claiming you are entirely unfit to manage your own finances or make sound legal decisions." I closed my eyes, a slow, calculating smile spreading across my face. He took the bait. He signed the sworn declaration attaching his name to the document under penalty of perjury, Mitchell continued. Brittany also submitted a supporting affidavit verifying his claims. They legally authenticated the forgery in a court of law. He sent over a settlement offer demanding you walk away with a meager $5,000. If you refuse, he plans to use the court filing to have you formally evaluated by a state-appointed physician. "Let him think he holds all the cards," I instructed, my eyes opening to stare at the glowing monitors. "Reach out to his legal counsel immediately. Request an emergency mediation session before the final court hearing. Tell them I am terrified. Tell them the pressure is too much and I am ready to negotiate a full surrender." Mitchell let out a low, appreciative chuckle. "You want to look him in the eye before you drop the hammer." "I want him to sign his own financial death warrant," I corrected, stepping away from the desk and looking out over the sprawling city skyline. "Schedule the mediation for tomorrow morning." I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the leather sofa. The stage was perfectly set. Nathan had officially crossed the point of no return, cementing his perjury in the public record. He believed he was walking into a mediation room to claim his stolen empire. He had no idea he was walking directly into a meticulously crafted execution chamber. The electronic notification from the California Family Court portal illuminated my dark penthouse command center. I clicked the secure link forwarded by my attorney, Mitchell Reed, and watched the scanned legal filings populate across my high-resolution monitors. The document header displayed the official seal of the state judiciary. Nathan had actually done it. He had taken his fabricated domestic sabotage and submitted it into the formal legal record. In the eyes of the law, filing a document under penalty of perjury represents the definitive point of no return. Prior to this moment, his fake psychiatric evaluation was merely a toxic prop used to manipulate banking institutions and human resources departments. By presenting that same forged medical report to a presiding judge to influence the division of marital assets, Nathan elevated his deceit into severe felony perjury. He transformed a messy suburban divorce tactic into a federal crime carrying mandatory minimum prison sentences. I scrolled through the digital pages, reading the petition my husband submitted to the court. His demands were breathtaking in their sheer audacity. He requested sole and undisputed control over every single marital asset we possessed. He petitioned the judge to award him the coastal beach house, the joint investment portfolios, and the entirety of his lucrative biotech income. He utilized the fake diagnosis from Dr. Eris Thorne as the primary foundation for his argument. He painted a harrowing picture for the court, claiming his wife was entirely unfit to manage finances or maintain basic legal autonomy. But Nathan did not walk into this legal snare alone. He brought his entire toxic family along for the ride. Attached to his primary petition were 3 supporting affidavits. I opened the first sworn statement. It belonged to Brittany. The 29-year-old mistress was so desperate to secure her unearned position in California high society that she gladly signed a legal document riddled with actionable lies. Brittany swore under oath that she had personally witnessed my severe manic episodes. She fabricated stories detailing late-night stalking incidents and erratic behavior, asserting that she feared for her physical safety. By signing that affidavit and submitting it alongside a forged medical credential, Brittany legally implicated herself as a direct co-conspirator in the perjury. The second and third affidavits belonged to Lucille and Heather. My image-obsessed mother-in-law could not resist the opportunity to play the tragic, heroic matriarch for the court record. Lucille signed a statement claiming she had spent years trying to get me psychiatric help for my unchecked delusions. Heather, ever the cruel sibling, verified the narrative by falsely swearing she had watched me mix dangerous prescription medications with alcohol during family gatherings. They thought they were merely adding weight to Nathan and his brilliant legal strategy. They assumed family court proceedings were just a formal venue for airing grievances and controlling the narrative. They failed to comprehend that a sworn affidavit is a binding legal contract with the truth. By affixing their signatures to those documents, Lucille and Heather tied themselves directly to a federal conspiracy. They handed me the exact rope required to drag the entire bloodline down into the abyss. My secure cell phone buzzed on the glass desk, interrupting my review of the court filings. The screen displayed a new text message from Nathan. He was riding the high of his official court submission, feeling like an untouchable corporate titan who had just conquered a weak opponent. I picked up the device and read the incoming text. The court has the evaluation, Wendy. You saw the filing. If you fight this, the judge will mandate a state-appointed psychiatric hold. Save yourself the humiliation. I am willing to offer you a $5,000 settlement to start over. Take the money, sign the uncontested waiver, and walk away. If you refuse, I will let the court lock you in a ward. I stared at the glowing screen. $5,000. He evaluated my silence, my dignity, and my 6 years of marriage at $5,000. He firmly believed I was sitting in a cheap motel room, trembling in fear, staring at a zero balance in my checking account. He assumed his financial starvation tactics had broken my spirit so thoroughly that I would view his insulting offer as a miraculous lifeline. I set the phone down and glanced at my secondary monitor. The screen displayed the secure routing portal for my offshore limited liability company. The current available balance sat at over $2.5 million in untraceable liquid capital. I did not need his pathetic settlement. I possessed the resources to hire an army of private investigators and corporate litigators to bury him under a mountain of civil litigation. But a drawn-out courtroom battle provides the enemy with time to maneuver. It allows them to hire defense attorneys who can muddy the waters, claim clerical errors, or shift the blame. I did not want a messy trial. I wanted a swift, clinical execution. I needed Nathan to feel so victorious and so invincible that he willingly assumed every single toxic liability associated with our marriage before he realized the house was on fire. I tapped the screen of my phone and dialed Mitchell. My attorney answered immediately, the sound of rustling legal briefs echoing in the background of the call. "I assume you read the filings," Wendy Mitchell said, his tone tight with professional outrage. "They committed documented perjury. We can file an emergency motion to strike the petition tomorrow morning. I can subpoena Dr. Thorne and have this entire fraudulent case thrown out by noon. We can have Nathan facing a judge for contempt before the weekend." "Do not file a motion to strike," I instructed, keeping my voice smooth and rhythmic. "Do not contact the courthouse. I want you to reach out to his legal counsel tonight." Mitchell paused, a heavy silence lingering on the line. "Wendy, if we do not contest this filing, the judge might grant his temporary orders. You are playing a very dangerous game with your legal autonomy." "I am setting the final stage," I countered, standing up from my ergonomic chair and pacing across the hardwood floor of the penthouse. I want you to reject his settlement offer, but request an emergency mediation session for tomorrow morning. Tell his lawyer that I am terrified of the court filings. Tell them I am emotionally exhausted, broke, and desperate to avoid a public psychiatric evaluation." "You want to surrender in mediation?" Mitchell asked, his sharp legal mind catching the edge of my strategy. "I want to look them all in the eye," I explained, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city lights below. "I want them sitting across a conference table, basking in their manufactured victory. I will offer them a total, unconditional surrender of all marital assets. I will give him the beach house, the investment portfolios, and his entire biotech income. But the surrender must include a specific legal condition." "What is the condition?" Mitchell asked. "He must sign a blanket assumption of liability clause," I stated, a cold smile forming on my lips. "Nathan must agree in writing to assume total, undisputed responsibility for all operational civil and corporate liabilities tied to our estate and his personal filings. I need him to legally lock himself to his own debts." Mitchell let out a low, breathless laugh. He embezzled funds from his biotech employer. If he signs an assumption of liability during a divorce mediation, he legally claims responsibility for the missing corporate money. He indemnifies you from the fallout and puts his own neck squarely in the noose. "He wants to be the undisputed king of the castle," I murmured. "We are going to hand him the crown and weld it to his skull. Tell his lawyer we will meet them at their office at 9 tomorrow morning." "Consider it done," Mitchell replied, the thrill of the impending ambush coloring his words. I ended the call and walked toward the master bedroom of the penthouse. The high-stakes corporate warfare was fully mapped out, but the execution relied entirely on my theatrical performance. If Nathan suspected for a single second that I was setting a trap, he would refuse to sign the liability clause. He needed to believe he was forcing a desperate, broken woman to capitulate. I opened my closet and bypassed the tailored silk suits and designer blazers. I reached into the back corner and pulled out the oversized, faded gray sweater and the scuffed denim jeans I had worn during the staged eviction. I laid the cheap clothing across the foot of the bed. I needed to look small, exhausted, and entirely defeated. I walked over to my jewelry box and opened the bottom compartment. Resting on the velvet lining was a small, sleek lapel pin. It looked like a standard piece of costume jewelry, but it was a high-grade audio recording device, often utilized by corporate compliance officers during internal investigations. California requires two-party consent for recording private conversations, but a mediation room operates under different legal parameters when fraudulent coercion is taking place. The device was my insurance policy, an indisputable record of his arrogance. The pressure cooker environment was perfectly set for the following morning. Nathan, Brittany, Lucille, and Heather would walk into that conference room expecting a victory parade. They would bring their smug smiles and their cruel insults, ready to watch the annoying wife surrender her life savings. They had no idea they were walking into a meticulously designed financial death warrant, and I was going to hand them the pen. The mediation office was a sterile, claustrophobic box constructed of frosted glass and cold, polished steel. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, pale glow across the expansive mahogany conference table. Mitchell and I arrived 30 minutes early to secure our positions. I sank into a stiff leather chair, pulling the sleeves of my oversized, faded gray sweater tightly over my knuckles. I forced my shoulders to hunch inward, cultivating the physical posture of a terrified, defeated prey animal. Pinned near the collar of my worn sweater rested a small, silver lapel piece. It resembled a cheap thrift store accessory, but concealed a high-grade audio recording device. A microscopic green light flashed once, confirming the internal microphone was actively capturing every breath in the room. Mitchell sat beside me, organizing a stack of blank legal pads, his face a mask of grim professional concern. We did not speak. The silence served as a vital part of the stage dressing. At precisely 9, the heavy glass door swung open. Nathan strode into the room wearing a tailored navy suit that projected an aura of unearned triumph. He carried himself with the swagger of a victorious king surveying conquered territory. Clinging tightly to his left arm was Brittany. She wore a pristine white designer trench coat paired with oversized sunglasses, pushing them up onto her head to survey the room. She clutched a highly coveted luxury handbag, the exact accessory I had traced back to Nathan's embezzled corporate funds. Trailing behind them was Nathan's legal counsel, a sharp-featured attorney named Campbell, who dropped his thick leather briefcase onto the table with a resounding thud. Campbell did not offer a greeting. He simply opened his laptop, preparing to dictate the terms of my formal surrender. Nathan pulled out a chair for Brittany before taking his own seat directly across from me. He leaned back, crossing his arms, and allowed a slow, satisfied smile to stretch across his face. "You look terrible, Wendy," Nathan noted, his tone dripping with patronizing faux sympathy. "I told you fighting the inevitable would only accelerate your decline. We are here to make this transition painless for you." I kept my eyes locked on the scuffed toes of my boots. I bit the inside of my cheek until a sharp metallic taste blossomed, forcing a genuine layer of moisture to pool in my eyes. I let out a ragged breath, allowing my lower lip to tremble. "I just want this nightmare to be over," I whispered, my voice cracking perfectly on the final syllable. Brittany let out a sharp, cruel laugh. The sound echoed off the frosted glass walls, carrying a vicious, undeniable sting. "You brought this nightmare on yourself," Brittany sneered, leaning forward to rest her elbows on the mahogany table. "If you had just accepted that Nathan outgrew you, we would not have to sit in this depressing room. You belong in a psychiatric ward, Wendy, not a beach house. You should be thanking us for handling your affairs while you fall apart." Mitchell bristled beside me, playing the protective lawyer flawlessly. He cautioned Campbell to keep his clients under control, but I reached out and placed a trembling hand on Mitchell's arm, stopping him. I needed them to speak freely. I needed the hidden lapel pin to record every cruel insult and every admission of their intent. "I am ready to sign the settlement," I stated, forcing another tear to spill over my eyelashes and trace a slow path down my cheek. I looked up, meeting Nathan's arrogant gaze. "You can have the coastal estate. You can have the joint investment accounts. You can keep your entire biotech income and the stock portfolios. I will walk away from all of it." Campbell paused, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. The seasoned lawyer cast a suspicious glance in my direction. In family court, an unconditional surrender of this magnitude is exceedingly rare. He opened his mouth to question the sudden capitulation, but Nathan raised a hand, silencing his own attorney. Nathan was too blinded by his towering ego to recognize the tactical retreat. He only saw a broken woman handing him millions of dollars on a silver platter. "That is a very sensible decision," Wendy, Nathan said, his chest puffing out with pride. "You are in no mental condition to manage complex real estate assets or investment dividends. We will draft the relinquishment forms immediately." I wiped my face with the oversized sleeve of my sweater, sniffing softly. "I will sign everything today," I promised, my voice wavering, "but I need one specific condition to finalize the agreement." Nathan frowned, his victorious smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "What condition?" he demanded, his tone sharpening with immediate defense. "You are in no position to make demands." I shrank back into my chair, projecting profound fear. "It is not a financial demand," I stammered, gripping the edge of the table. "I just need a clean break. I need to know I am safe from any future lawsuits or creditor claims tied to your career. If I am walking away with nothing, I need an indemnification clause. I want you to assume all operational, civil, and corporate liabilities tied to our marital estate and your personal filings. I want a guarantee that your debts are yours alone." Campbell leaned over, whispering urgently into Nathan's ear. I watched the micro-expressions flash across the lawyer's face. Campbell understood the inherent danger of a blanket assumption of liability clause. He was advising his client to reject the broad terminology and limit the indemnification strictly to known marital debts. He was trying to protect his client from unseen corporate traps. But Nathan operated on pure, unchecked narcissism. He viewed my request as the ultimate proof of my pathetic paranoia. He thought I was terrified of standard mortgage paperwork and routine credit card balances. He looked at me, his eyes alight with predatory amusement. He waved Campbell off, dismissing the seasoned legal advice with a flick of his wrist. "You think I cannot handle my own financial footprint?" Nathan mocked, leaning across the table to stare down at me. "You think I need your protection from creditors? I am a senior biotech executive, Wendy. I manage multi-million-dollar accounts before noon. I do not have liabilities. I have leverage." I kept my head bowed, hiding the cold, mechanical satisfaction igniting in my chest. He was taking the bait. He was walking directly into the center of the snare and demanding to wear the steel trap as a crown. "If you want a piece of paper that says I take all the risk, fine," Nathan declared, throwing his hands up in a theatrical display of dominance. "Draft it, Campbell. Give her the exact wording she wants. The trust will assume 100% of the financial risk. Civil obligations and corporate debt tied to my name, I want her legally barred from ever trying to claim a single penny of my future earnings." Campbell hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Nathan shot him a furious glare, snapping his fingers impatiently. "Do it, Campbell. I am not losing this deal because you are afraid of standard indemnification jargon. Write the clause." The rapid clicking of keys filled the silent room. Campbell drafted the Trojan Horse Treaty exactly as dictated. He printed the final settlement agreement on the laser printer resting in the corner of the suite. He slid the thick stack of premium legal paper across the mahogany table. The pages stopped directly in front of Nathan. Nathan picked up his expensive fountain pen. He did not bother reading the fine print. He did not ask his lawyer to review the final language. He simply flipped to the signature page and signed his name with a grand sweeping flourish. He handed the pen to Brittany, who eagerly signed her name on the witness line, cementing her legal involvement in the fraudulent trust, assuming the debt. They pushed the documents across the table toward me. I picked up a cheap ballpoint pen and signed my name with a shaking hand, transferring the deed to the beach house and relinquishing my claim to the marital wealth. I pushed the papers back, keeping my eyes glued to the table. Nathan stood up, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. He looked down at me, a portrait of supreme, arrogant victory. "I will see you in court on Friday morning, Wendy," Nathan announced, his voice echoing with finality. "The judge will officially enter this settlement into the record. Do not be late." "I will be there," I whispered, wrapping my arms around my torso. Nathan and Brittany turned and marched out of the mediation room, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and misplaced triumph in their wake. Campbell packed his briefcase, shooting me one final perplexed look before following his client out the door. The heavy glass swung shut, securing the room. I sat perfectly still for 10 seconds, ensuring they were entirely out of earshot. Then I lowered my hands. The fabricated tears stopped instantly. The trembling in my shoulders ceased. I sat up straight, shedding the posture of the terrified victim. I reached up and tapped the silver lapel pin, ending the covert recording. Mitchell let out a long, heavy exhale, sinking back into his leather chair. "I have seen hostile takeovers before," Mitchell murmured, shaking his head in sheer disbelief, "but I have never seen a man eagerly build his own execution chamber and lock the door from the inside." "He wanted to prove he was untouchable," I replied, my voice returning to its natural cold authority. "By forcing that liability clause into the formal settlement, he just legally assumed responsibility for a massive, unregulated shadow loan and hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen corporate funds. He built a fortress out of gasoline." "Friday morning is the final hearing," Mitchell stated, gathering his legal pads. "Once the judge stamps this treaty, Nathan is legally bound to the embezzlement." I stood up, pulling the oversized sweater tight around my shoulders. I looked out the frosted glass window of the mediation suite. "Friday morning is going to be spectacular," I said. "Let them enjoy their stolen beach house for the next 48 hours. When the gavel falls, I am going to burn his entire empire to the ground." Friday morning arrived with a biting coastal chill that penetrated the thick glass doors of the sprawling California family courthouse. The towering architecture of the building projected strict legal authority, but the halls buzzed with the chaotic energy of fractured lives. I sat on a hard wooden bench just outside courtroom 4, waiting for my cue. Through the heavy oak doors, I could hear the muted shuffle of attorneys preparing their dockets. Down the long marble corridor, a localized parade of unearned triumph approached. Nathan strutted forward, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that radiated towering ego. Brittany clung to his arm, draped in a pristine white designer dress that looked more appropriate for a luxury yacht party than a sober legal proceeding. Behind them, Lucille and Heather marched in perfect synchronization. My mother-in-law wore a somber but stunning dark cashmere coat, while my sister-in-law carried a rare leather handbag, holding her head high. They treated the austere courthouse corridor like their personal runway, walking with the inflated confidence of conquerors, preparing to collect their spoils. I kept my head bowed, letting my hair fall forward to obscure my face. I wore the faded, oversized gray sweater and the scuffed denim jeans pulling the sleeves down over my knuckles. I projected the physical embodiment of a shattered, defeated victim. As they passed my bench, Heather let out a sharp, mocking laugh. She whispered a cruel insult to Brittany, pointing at my cheap clothing. Nathan did not even break his stride. He glanced down at me with a look of pure, clinical disdain, entirely convinced he was staring at a woman who had lost her grip on reality. They entered the courtroom, taking their seats at the petitioner table. Mitchell Reed, my attorney, sat quietly at the respondent's side, organizing his blank legal pads. I stood up, feeling the rough fabric of the sweater scratch against my skin. I took a deep, steady breath, walked through the swinging wooden partition, and took my seat next to Mitchell. The air inside the room felt heavy, charged with the distinct electric tension of high-stakes litigation. The bailiff called the room to order. We all stood as the presiding judge emerged from his private chambers. He was an older man with sharp, discerning eyes and a rigid posture indicating zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. He took his seat at the elevated bench, adjusting his reading glasses as he opened the thick case file resting before him. The judge cleared his throat, scanning the initial pages of the settlement treaty Nathan had dictated during the mediation session. "I am reviewing a highly unusual petition here," the judge stated, his voice echoing cleanly off the polished wood paneling. "The petitioner is requesting a total deviation from standard community property division, citing extreme medical incapacity on the part of the respondent. Furthermore, we have a highly unorthodox settlement agreement drafted just yesterday, wherein the respondent surrenders all claims to the marital estate, while the petitioner assumes all operational and corporate liabilities." Campbell stood up, buttoning his tailored jacket. He cleared his throat, adopting the grave, somber tone of a legal professional burdened by a tragic situation. "Your Honor, my client is navigating a truly heartbreaking family crisis." Campbell began pacing slightly behind Nathan. "We submitted this petition not out of greed, but out of profound necessity. The respondent has suffered a severe psychiatric break. She is no longer capable of managing complex financial assets or maintaining her own personal safety." Campbell reached into his briefcase and retrieved a crisp color copy of the forged medical evaluation. He held the document aloft, waving it slightly to ensure the judge caught sight of the official clinic logo. "We have provided a sworn clinical assessment from Dr. Eris Thorne, a highly respected specialist within the state healthcare network," Campbell continued, his voice echoing with manufactured sorrow. "This document details a harrowing prognosis. My client is simply trying to protect his wife from herself. He is stepping up to shoulder the entire financial burden of their estate, ensuring she cannot cause further harm to her own livelihood." I kept my eyes fixed on the scuffed toes of my boots, letting my shoulders slump forward. I channeled every ounce of restraint I possessed, refusing to react to the breathtaking perjury unfolding mere feet away. From the gallery behind us, Lucille let out a soft, theatrical sniffle. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, performing the role of the devastated, caring mother-in-law to sheer perfection. Heather patted her shoulder, offering a performance of familial solidarity designed specifically for the judge to witness. They were weaving a masterful illusion, portraying themselves as the noble protectors of a fragile, broken woman. The judge frowned, leaning forward to scrutinize the settlement papers. He looked directly at Nathan. "You understand that by signing this specific indemnification clause, you are taking on total risk for your biotech holdings and any undiscovered debts. You are legally insulating the respondent from any future fallout." Nathan stood up tall, projecting the aura of a benevolent savior. "I understand, Your Honor," Nathan said, offering a solemn nod. "It is a heavy burden, but it is my duty. I cannot let her instability destroy what we've built. I am ready to assume all the obligations." The judge sighed, setting his pen down. He turned his sharp gaze toward my table. The intense scrutiny of the court bore down on me. "Mrs. Bell," the judge said, his tone softening slightly, laced with cautious pity, I am looking at a document where you are relinquishing your home, your savings, and your legal autonomy. Given the severe medical claims presented today, I must ask you directly on the public record, do you truly comprehend the profound magnitude of the surrender you are about to finalize? Are you signing this under any form of coercion, or do you willingly accept these terms? The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence. Nathan smirked, a tiny upward twitch of his lips, secure in his impending victory. Brittany crossed her legs, leaning forward to watch my final humiliation. Lucille and Heather held their collective breath, waiting for the gavel to drop and seal their unearned wealth. I did not whimper. I did not force another fake tear to spill over my eyelashes. I placed my hands flat on the polished wooden table. I pushed my chair back, the scraping sound cutting sharp and loud through the dead silence of the room. I stood up slowly, deliberately locking my knees and pulling my spine perfectly straight. I gained several inches in height instantly, altering the physical dynamic of the space. I reached for the bottom hem of the oversized gray sweater. In one smooth, fluid motion, I pulled the cheap, faded fabric over my head and tossed it carelessly onto the respondent table. A sharp, collective intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Underneath that pathetic costume, I wore a razor-sharp, wildly expensive midnight blue silk blazer. The tailoring was flawless, hugging my shoulders with strict corporate authority. I smoothed the lapels, shedding the fragile victim persona like a discarded second skin. The weeping, defeated woman they had mocked for days vanished into the sterile courtroom air, replaced entirely by the lethal, calculating aura of an apex predator ready to strike. Nathan recoiled, his victorious smirk collapsing into an expression of sheer, bewildered panic. He stared at the silk blazer, his eyes darting frantically to my face, searching for the broken wife he thought he had cornered. He found nothing but a cold, unyielding void. Brittany uncrossed her legs, gripping the edge of the table as her manufactured confidence splintered. In the gallery, Lucille dropped her lace handkerchief, her mouth falling open in shock. I looked up, meeting the judge with a clear, unwavering gaze. The air in the room crackled with undeniable electric tension. The trap they had so eagerly constructed was fully armed, loaded with their own perjury and signed confessions. They had marched into this courtroom expecting a coronation. They had no idea I was about to unleash a financial and legal execution that would erase their empire from the map. "Your Honor," I stated, my voice ringing out crisp, resonant, and devoid of any tremor, "I comprehend the magnitude of this document perfectly." The judge narrowed his eyes, sensing the sudden violent shift in the atmospheric pressure of his courtroom. Mitchell Reed stood up beside me, opening his sleek leather briefcase with a satisfying, definitive snap. The time for hiding in the shadows was over. It was time to introduce the real evidence. "Your Honor, I am not unstable. I am a senior healthcare compliance auditor," I stated. The words sliced through the stifling courtroom air like a well-honed blade. I kept my spine perfectly straight, my chin elevated, letting the sheer weight of my professional title settle over the heavy oak bench. For 6 years, my husband treated my career as a mundane clerical hobby, something cute to mention at cocktail parties before pivoting back to his own biotech sales pitches. He never grasped that my daily routine involved dissecting medical fraud, tracking illicit billing codes, and destroying corrupt physicians. I spend my life hunting liars who hide behind official letterheads. The judge lowered his silver reading glasses, his stern expression shifting from cautious pity to sharp, focused attention. He looked at the discarded gray sweater crumpled on our table, then back to my tailored midnight blue silk blazer. The physical transformation mirrored the shift in power. The weeping, fragile victim was gone, replaced by a woman who engineered corporate executions. Mitchell Reed did not wait for an invitation to proceed. My attorney stepped forward, lifting a thick, leather-bound binder from his sleek briefcase and dropped it onto the respondent table. The thud resonated through the room like a heavy gavel strike, causing everyone at the petitioner table to flinch. Mitchell extracted a crisp, notarized document bearing a distinct raised clinical seal. He handed the paper directly to the bailiff, who carried it up to the bench. "That is a sworn, notarized affidavit from Dr. Eris Thorne," Mitchell announced, his voice projecting a cold, lethal calm that commanded the entire room. "He is the very physician whose signature supposedly adorns the psychiatric evaluation submitted by the petitioner this morning. Dr. Thorne testifies under penalty of perjury that he has never met my client. He confirms his Federal Drug Enforcement Agency identifier and his state medical license number were stolen. They were fraudulently stamped onto a fabricated clinical assessment." I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with Nathan. The smug, victorious flush drained from his face in a single instant, leaving his skin a sickly, ashen gray. His jaw slackened, his mouth hanging slightly open as his brain struggled to process the ambush. He stared at the affidavit in the judge's hands, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow, staccato breaths. His bespoke charcoal suit suddenly looked like a hollow costume draped over a terrified fraud. Beside him, Brittany let out a sharp, breathless gasp. Her hands flew to her mouth, her manicured acrylic nails digging into her cheeks. The reality of her sworn co-conspirator statement crashed down upon her. She had submitted an affidavit supporting the lies in that fake medical record. She was now legally tethered to the perjury. "It is a clear forgery," the judge murmured, his eyes scanning the precise legal text provided by the physician. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet, a chilling realization sweeping across the gallery. I did not stop to let them catch their breath. The momentum belonged entirely to me. I pulled a secondary folder from my own stack of evidence, sliding it toward Mitchell. "The forgery was only the first step, Your Honor," I explained, maintaining my irrefutable rhythm. "My husband sought to destroy my professional clearance. He transmitted that fabricated document directly to the Human Resources Department of my corporate healthcare network." Mitchell handed the next exhibit to the bailiff. "We have the digital footprint, network access logs, and IP address routing data retrieved by the Corporate Cybersecurity Division. The transmission originated from the petitioner's exact desk inside his biotech firm, traveling across state servers. By transmitting a stolen medical credential and a forged document across secured digital networks, he committed federal wire fraud. He sought to inflict tangible economic harm, and he left a digital trail leading right back to his own keyboard." Campbell, Nathan's seasoned attorney, physically recoiled. The veteran lawyer took a full, deliberate step away from his client. Campbell looked at the printed IP logs, then at Nathan, his professional composure shattering into profound horror. He realized in a fraction of a second that his client had just utilized his legal services to submit fraudulent evidence to a presiding judge. Nathan had tricked his own counsel into facilitating severe perjury, placing Campbell's own license in jeopardy. Campbell raised his hands, shaking his head, visually and legally distancing himself from the toxic fallout occurring at his table. "Your Honor, I must formally request to withdraw as counsel for the petitioner," Campbell stammered, his voice tight with panic. "I had no prior knowledge of this deception." "You cannot withdraw a loaded weapon after you have already pulled the trigger," Mitchell interrupted, a predatory grin flashing under the fluorescent lights. "But we are not finished addressing the damage inflicted by these individuals." Mitchell walked over to the media cart stationed near the jury box. He connected a sleek tablet to the courtroom display monitors. The petitioner and his mistress did not just attempt to steal a coastal estate and ruin a career. They orchestrated a highly publicized, coordinated character assassination. Mitchell tapped the screen. Brittany's viral, tear-stained video flared to life on the large monitors facing the gallery. Her manufactured sobs filled the silent courtroom, the audio crisp and undeniable. The digital mistress pleaded for safety, claiming she was terrorized by an unhinged stalker ex-wife. The display then scrolled down, highlighting the vicious, validating comments typed by Lucille and Heather. Seeing the video play in a sterile legal setting, stripped of its social media filter, exposed it for the cruel, manipulative performance it truly was. Brittany shrank into her wooden chair, shielding her face with her luxury handbag, desperate to hide from the glaring screens. In the gallery, Lucille went rigid. Her pristine posture crumbled as her cyberbullying was broadcast into the official legal record. Heather covered her eyes, recognizing the inescapable digital trail they had proudly created. This video, along with every comment and shared post, has been forensically archived, Mitchell stated, pausing the video on Brittany's weeping, deceitful face. We are submitting this multimedia package as Exhibit A for a civil lawsuit. We are filing claims for defamation, tortious interference with a corporate contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The Mistress provided the exact financial damage calculations we needed, recorded on her own smartphone. The judge took off his glasses, his face flushing with a deep, righteous fury. He glared down at the petitioner table, his eyes burning into Nathan and Brittany. "Mr. Bell," the judge said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commanded total silence, "you marched into my courtroom, swore an oath to tell the truth, and submitted a forged medical document in a brazen attempt to steal property and incarcerate your spouse. You treated this institution like a tool for your own criminal enterprise." Nathan opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His vocal cords seemed paralyzed by the sheer scope of the trap. He looked back at his mother for support, but Lucille was trembling, frozen by the realization that her precious son was headed for a federal penitentiary. I stood tall, feeling a profound, sweeping sense of vindication. I had lured them into the deep water, handed them an anchor, and watched them tie it around their own necks. They thought the settlement treaty they signed in mediation was a victory, but it was their binding admission to a burning ship. Yet, my trap possessed one final, fatal layer. The medical forgery and the defamation lawsuit were merely the opening acts. The true devastation lay hidden in the corporate ledgers Nathan had tried to bury, the very debts he had demanded to assume just 24 hours ago. I turned my gaze away from my broken husband and looked straight down the center aisle of the courtroom. I watched the heavy, brass-handled gallery doors just as the wood groaned under a sudden, forceful push. The final reckoning had arrived. The heavy brass handles of the gallery doors turned with a sharp, mechanical clack. The polished oak swung inward, hitting the rubber wall stops with a resonant thud that shook the silent courtroom. My gaze remained fixed on the center aisle as a synchronized formation of individuals marched over the threshold. They did not wear the standard, tailored suits of family law practitioners. The men and women leading the procession wore dark, tactical windbreakers bearing stark yellow lettering across their shoulders. The Federal Bureau of Investigation. Right beside them walked agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Flanking the federal authorities was a tall, ruthless corporate litigator representing the board of directors from Nathan's biotech employer. His face was a mask of cold fury. The polished leather of their shoes squeaked against the marble floor, a rhythmic, terrifying drumbeat marching directly toward the petitioner table. The remaining color drained from Nathan's face. He gripped the edge of the wooden table so hard his knuckles turned bone white. He attempted to stand, but his knees betrayed him, sending him crashing back down into his chair. Beside him, Brittany shrank backward, her luxury handbag slipping from her grasp and spilling onto the floor. The lead corporate litigator bypassed the swinging wooden partition and stood directly before the judge, holding a thick, sealed dossier. "Your Honor," the litigator announced, his voice echoing with unforgiving authority, "I represent the executive board of Zenith Biosciences. We are intervening in these proceedings to execute emergency asset seizures and assist federal authorities in a high-stakes criminal apprehension." The judge leaned forward, peering over his silver reading glasses. "State your grounds, counselor." The litigator turned his piercing gaze toward my husband. For the past 18 months, Nathan Bell has orchestrated an immense, sophisticated embezzlement scheme within our procurement division. He established a network of dummy vendor accounts and siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars from our sales budgets. He routed stolen corporate capital across state lines, utilizing encrypted shell companies to fund his personal lifestyle. Nathan opened his mouth, letting out a dry, raspy gasp. He looked around the room, searching for an exit that did not exist. The corporate litigator did not pause to let him breathe. Normally, recovering these stolen funds from a disgraced executive is a drawn-out, grueling civil process, the litigator continued, a sharp, predatory grin forming on his lips. Criminals often hide their assets behind marital shields or complex trusts. However, we were anonymously provided with a forensic audit 24 hours ago. Furthermore, we reviewed the mediation settlement Mr. Bell proudly entered into the public record this morning. By dictating a blanket assumption of liability clause, he legally and bindingly volunteered to take 100% of the financial risk and debt tied to his name. He waived his right to contest the claims. He shackled himself to the stolen funds and the toxic shadow loan he took out against his coastal property. We are executing immediate seizure of the newly formed family trust to satisfy his debts. A shrill, piercing shriek shattered the courtroom air. Lucille shot up from her seat in the gallery, clutching her chest. Her designer cashmere coat slipped off her shoulders, pooling on the wooden bench. During the frenzied rush to secure the beach house, Nathan had convinced his mother to act as a financial guarantor for the new family trust. He assured her it was merely a formality, a temporary measure to bypass my legal claims. "My retirement," Lucille wailed, her voice cracking into a hysterical pitch. "My investment portfolios are cross-collateralized into that trust. You told me it was safe, Nathan. You told me the trust was an impenetrable fortress." "It was a fortress, Lucille," I thought, staring at the weeping matriarch. "But he locked you inside and handed the keys to a federal agency." The litigator ignored the weeping mother, focusing instead on the mistress trying to quietly slide her chair toward the side aisle. Brittany thought she could simply slip away, abandoning her ruined lover the exact moment the money evaporated. The SEC agent stepped forward, blocking her escape path. "Brittany Collins," the agent stated, pulling a printed transcript from his windbreaker pocket. "You are not just a bystander in this operation. Our cyber division intercepted your encrypted communications. You were actively employed by a rival vendor in the logistics sector. You colluded with Mr. Bell to falsify those procurement invoices, taking a hefty percentage of the stolen capital to fund your social media influencer lifestyle. You laundered stolen corporate cash through luxury car leases and high-end Beverly Hills jewelers. You are an active, unindicted co-conspirator in a federal wire fraud ring." The twist hit the courtroom like a physical shockwave. Brittany was not just a naive mistress dazzled by a wealthy executive. She was an embedded fraudster, milking his arrogance for her own financial gain. The ultimate betrayal fractured their toxic romance in an instant. Brittany threw her hands up, pointing a trembling acrylic nail directly at Nathan. "He made me do it!" Brittany screamed, her carefully curated high society persona dissolving into raw, frantic survival instinct. "I did not know the money was stolen. He told me it was his executive bonus. He is a liar. He lied to me just like he lied to his wife." Nathan snapped his head toward her, his eyes bulging with disbelief. "You greedy parasite," Nathan roared, lunging across the table toward her. "You begged for those diamonds. You demanded the beach house. You helped me draft the fake medical report." The federal agents moved with swift, undeniable precision. Two officers grabbed Nathan by the shoulders, twisting his arms behind his back. The cold, metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs echoed sharply through the room, sealing his fate. A female agent secured Brittany, pulling her wrists together as the mistress sobbed and thrashed against the restraint. As the steel bit into his wrists, Nathan suffered a complete psychological collapse. The polished, charming biotech sales executive evaporated, leaving behind a frantic, raving, cornered animal. The sheer magnitude of his defeat broke his grip on reality. He twisted his neck, staring wildly around the courtroom. His eyes locked onto me, standing calm and untouched beside the respondent table. "She set me up!" Nathan screamed, a line of saliva forming at the corner of his mouth. "She planted hidden microphones. She hacked my servers. She is a witch. She orchestrated this entire conspiracy to ruin me. You have to arrest her. Look at her standing there. She is the mastermind. She is crazy. She is a clinical psychopath." He thrashed against the agents, kicking his expensive leather shoes against the mahogany table. His face turned a deep mottled purple, his tie askew, his hair falling wildly over his forehead. He looked entirely detached from reality, spewing frantic conspiracy theories and demanding the judge lock me in a padded cell. The judge peered down from the elevated bench, observing the disgraced executive's frantic meltdown. The courtroom was a theater of pure poetic justice, and the man in the black robe held the final script. The judge leaned toward his microphone, his expression projecting profound clinical disdain. "Mr. Bell," the judge stated, his voice cutting through the chaotic raving with icy precision, "you seem incredibly unstable." The silence that followed that single sentence was the most satisfying sound I have ever experienced. It was the closing chord of a perfect symphony. The agents yanked Nathan backward, dragging him down the center aisle. He continued to scream, his voice growing hoarse, his expensive suit pulling at the seams. Brittany was hauled away right behind him, weeping hysterically and hurling vicious obscenities at the man she claimed to love just hours prior. Lucille chased after the agents, her heels clattering against the marble floor. She was not trying to comfort her son. She grabbed Nathan's sleeve, shaking his bound arm. "Give me my retirement back!" Lucille shrieked, her maternal facade entirely erased by the terror of impending poverty. "You stole my future, you arrogant fool! Tell them the trust is a mistake!" Heather backed away from her own mother, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, slipping out a side door to escape the radioactive fallout of her family's destruction. The toxic bloodline disintegrated right in front of my eyes, turning their fangs on each other the very second the unearned wealth disappeared. I stood at the respondent table, watching the heavy brass doors swing shut behind the chaotic procession. The oppressive, heavy atmosphere lifted from the courtroom, leaving behind a crisp, cleansing silence. Mitchell Reed closed his sleek briefcase, the metallic snap signaling the end of the legal slaughter. He turned to me, offering a slow, respectful nod. The war was over. The orchestrator of my intended ruin was currently sitting in the back of a federal vehicle, stripped of his assets, his freedom, and his dignity. The mistress who tried to steal my life was facing her own lengthy prison sentence. The mother-in-law who mocked my career was bankrupt. I picked up my tailored silk blazer, smoothing the lapels, and preparing to step out into the brilliant California sunshine, ready to claim the beautiful, serene aftermath I had so meticulously secured. 6 months have passed since the heavy brass doors of the family courtroom swung shut on my former life. I sit on the sprawling, sun-drenched balcony of my new estate, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the Pacific Ocean against the jagged coastal rocks below. The salty morning breeze carries the faint scent of wild jasmine, wrapping around me like a warm, protective blanket. I hold a ceramic mug of dark roast coffee, feeling the soothing heat seep into my palms. This oceanfront property is significantly larger than the house I left behind, boasting panoramic views of the horizon and secluded private beach access. I purchased it outright using the untouched capital from my hidden offshore limited liability company. The transition from a target of domestic sabotage to a homeowner of a pristine coastal sanctuary feels like breathing fresh air after years spent underwater. The promotion came 3 weeks after the corporate dust settled. The executive board of my healthcare network recognized the meticulous precision I utilized to dismantle a federal fraud ring operating right under their noses. They did not just lift my temporary suspension, they elevated me. I now serve as the Chief Compliance Officer, overseeing the entire Western Regional Division. My pristine corner office overlooks the bustling Silicon Valley tech hubs, serving as a daily reminder that true authority is earned through unyielding vigilance. My colleagues treat me with a profound, quiet respect. They know I am a woman who navigated a treacherous labyrinth of identity theft and extortion and emerged wearing the crown. Nathan Bell is no longer a charismatic biotech sales executive pitching expensive equipment contracts over exclusive steak dinners. He traded those bespoke tailored suits for the standard-issue khaki uniform of a federal inmate. A judge handed him a severe sentence for multiple counts of wire fraud, perjury, and corporate embezzlement. He spends his days sitting in a heavily guarded penitentiary, stripped of his arrogance, his wealth, and his freedom. The man who tried to convince the world I was clinically insane now resides in a concrete cell, desperately trying to negotiate his reality with inmates who do not care about his former coastal lifestyle. The metallic clang of closing cell doors serves as his daily alarm clock, a far cry from the gentle ocean waves he thought he had stolen. Brittany Collins shares a similar bleak existence in a separate federal facility for women. The young mistress who craved high society influencer status traded her ring lights and viral videos for scheduled headcounts and steel bars. Her digital defamation campaign remains a cautionary tale in the local social circles. The authorities seized her luxury handbag, her diamond engagement ring, and every designer asset she procured using stolen corporate funds. The influencer who wept on camera demanding protection from a fabricated stalker is now enduring the harsh, unforgiving reality of a federal prison sentence. Their toxic romance shattered the exact moment the handcuffs clicked shut, replaced by bitter recriminations and endless legal appeals that will never see the light of a courtroom. They turned on each other with a vicious speed, desperate to trade secrets for a reduced sentence, but the federal prosecutors did not need their testimony. The forensic data I provided was ironclad. The collateral damage inflicted upon the toxic in-laws remains the most satisfying chapter of this financial execution. Lucille and Heather truly believed they were inheriting a grand beachfront estate when they eagerly assumed the responsibilities of the newly formed family trust. They moved their belongings into the expansive rooms, planning extravagant renovation projects and hosting celebratory dinners for their country club associates. They failed to realize the biotech corporation held the primary claim to the embezzled funds financing the property. The corporate litigators moved with swift precision, securing a court order and seizing the beach house to satisfy the crushing shadow debts Nathan had accumulated. Because Lucille foolishly cross-collateralized her own retirement portfolios into that specific trust to act as a guarantor, the corporation drained her accounts dry. The wealth she spent a lifetime flaunting evaporated into thin air. Lucille and Heather were formally evicted from the coastal property by armed county sheriffs. Stripped of their elite socialite status, they were forced to relocate inland, far away from the sparkling ocean views. They now share a cramped, low-income apartment situated next to a noisy industrial park, miles away from the affluent neighborhoods they used to dominate. The peeling paint and thin walls of their new residence serve as a constant reminder of their towering hubris. Heather suffered one final specific financial sting. During her triumphant invasion of my former living room, she deliberately shattered a delicate antique porcelain vase, mocking my supposed inability to protect my belongings. She assumed it was a cheap flea market trinket fit for the garbage. She did not know I held a certified appraisal valuing the heirloom at $15,000. My attorney filed a civil claim for property destruction, utilizing the security footage from the smart home system and the official appraisal certificate as irrefutable evidence. The judge presiding over the civil matter exhibited zero patience for Heather and her tearful excuses. He ordered her to pay the full replacement value, garnishing the wages from her new minimum wage retail job to satisfy the debt. Every single paycheck she earns carries a tangible monetary deduction, reinforcing the severe cost of her profound arrogance. She spends her days folding clothes in a discount department store, watching a portion of her meager earnings flow directly into my holding accounts. I take a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the crisp morning sun warm the skin on my arms. I look out at the endless expanse of the blue ocean, reflecting on the profound lessons embedded in this harrowing journey. When toxic individuals decide to orchestrate your downfall, they often rely on the element of shock and intense psychological pressure. They utilize gaslighting to distort your reality, painting you as the unstable element in the equation. They expect you to panic, to scream, to defend yourself loudly, and play right into their manufactured narrative. They want you to forfeit your dignity in a desperate bid to prove your sanity. The most potent weapon you can wield against a narcissist is profound silence. When they try to label you as crazy, you do not waste your breath screaming your truth into a void of intentional misunderstanding. You step back and allow them to construct their elaborate house of lies. You let them feel untouchable, because an enemy blinded by ego is an enemy who ignores the structural integrity of their own trap. You secure your perimeter, you gather your undeniable data, and you wait for the precise moment to strike the match. True power does not need to announce itself in a crowded restaurant. It does not require viral videos or cruel insults hurled across a living room. True power is calculated, silent, and irrefutable. It is the steady hand of a compliance auditor signing a document that seals the fate of a corrupt executive. It is the ability to walk away from a burning building without ever looking back at the flames. We live in a society that often rewards the loudest voice in the room, but the loudest voice is rarely the smartest. The people who boast about their wealth, their connections, and their undeniable superiority are usually hiding catastrophic vulnerabilities. They project an image of invincibility to mask the rotting foundation beneath their feet. When you learn to observe rather than react, you strip them of their primary weapon. You force them to operate in a vacuum where their lives eventually collapse under their own weight. You hold the pen that writes the final chapter of your own story. Do not let liars dictate your narrative. Do not let manipulative family members shame you into submission. Build your fortress, protect your peace, and never interrupt a predator when they are busy locking themselves inside a burning building. My name is Wendy Bell. My husband told the world I was unstable. Now he is wearing a federal uniform, and I am listening to the ocean waves. When the dust finally settled over the California coastline, leaving me with a serene oceanfront view and the quiet triumph of justice, I found myself reflecting not on the financial execution I had orchestrated, but on the root of the rot that made it necessary. The tragedy of Nathan Bell and his toxic family was not merely a story of corporate greed or a messy marital betrayal. It was, at its very core, a devastating portrait of generational failure. As I sat on my balcony, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves, I realized that the true villain of my story was not just a cheating husband or a scheming mistress. The underlying architect of this disaster was a profound failure in parenting. We often view traditional family structures through a lens of inherent virtue. In American culture, especially within the affluent enclaves of places like Silicon Valley, success is frequently measured by external metrics: the zip code of the family home, the prestige of the career, the flawless aesthetic presented at country club dinners and holiday gatherings. We are taught that providing a comfortable life and shielding our children from hardship is the ultimate expression of love. But looking back at Lucille, nodding sympathetically in that upscale restaurant as a mistress publicly dismantled my sanity, I saw a mother who had fundamentally failed her most vital duty. She did not raise a man. She raised a predator dressed in a bespoke suit, a child shielded from consequence until his entitlement mutated into criminality. There is a pervasive, almost sacred belief in our society that a parent must protect their child against the world, no matter the cost. We celebrate the fierce, unconditional defense of our own flesh and blood. Yet, my experience has forced me to embrace a deeply counter-conventional viewpoint. What if blind protection is the ultimate betrayal? What if a parent's true, highest responsibility is not to defend their child against the world, but to protect the world from their child if that child loses their moral compass? Lucille spent her life wrapping Nathan and Heather in a suffocating cocoon of unearned superiority. When Heather callously shattered my late father's antique vase in my living room, she did not do it out of a sudden surge of temper. She did it because she was raised in an environment that lacked fundamental emotional awareness. She was taught that her fleeting amusement was far more valuable than another human being's pain. When Nathan forged a medical document to institutionalize his own wife, he did so without a shred of guilt because his family culture had instilled in him a dangerous delusion that his desires justified any deceit. Fairness, honesty, and empathy were never cultivated in their home. They were treated as inconvenient obstacles to getting what they wanted. Raising a child to navigate modern society requires more than ensuring they achieve academic or financial success. It requires the grueling daily work of instilling emotional intelligence. It demands that parents allow their children to feel the sharp sting of their own mistakes. When we rescue our children from every failure, when we validate their cruelty to preserve their fragile self-esteem, we are not loving them. We are actively disarming them for the real world. We are teaching them that accountability is a concept meant only for lesser people. True family responsibility means holding a mirror up to our children, even when the reflection breaks our hearts. If Lucille had looked at her son years ago and held him accountable for his earliest deceptions, he might not be wearing a federal uniform today. If she had demanded fairness and honesty at the dinner table, she might not be sitting in a cramped, low-income apartment mourning the loss of a stolen empire. She prioritized the illusion of a perfect family over the difficult reality of raising decent human beings. In her desperate bid to keep her son perched on a pedestal, she handed him the very tools he used to dig his own grave. This realization shifted my perspective entirely. It made me look at the families walking along the beach below my balcony, watching parents interact with their children. How many of us are unknowingly nurturing entitlement? How many of us confuse providing a soft landing with preventing our children from learning how to walk on rough terrain? We must redefine what it means to be a successful family. The legacy we leave our children cannot be quantified by offshore accounts, real estate portfolios, or inherited prestige. The only inheritance that truly matters is a calibrated internal compass, one that points true north even when the lights go out. We must raise children who possess the emotional fortitude to accept defeat gracefully, the honesty to admit fault, and the fairness to treat others with unwavering dignity, especially when those others possess no leverage over them. If this reflection resonates with you, if you have ever had to untangle the complicated threads of toxic family dynamics, or if you are actively fighting to break generational cycles and raise your own children with genuine emotional awareness, I encourage you to subscribe and follow Sarah Told Stories. We explore these profound, unspoken truths of human behavior every single week, shining a light on the hidden corners of our relationships to help build a healthier, more authentic reality. As the sun dips below the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery gold, I am left with a quiet, lingering thought. We spend so much of our lives meticulously designing our futures, auditing our finances, and protecting our physical assets. But the human soul is the only ledger that truly balances in the end. The people who tried to destroy me were ultimately destroyed by the very traits their parents nurtured. They collapsed under the weight of their own uncorrected flaws. It begs a haunting question that every parent, every partner, and every individual must eventually face in the quiet hours of the night. When the external validation fades, when the wealth evaporates and the audience stops clapping, what remains of the person you have built? Are you raising a human capable of weathering the storm, or are you simply raising the storm itself? Perhaps the real danger is not the wolves waiting in the dark outside our doors. Perhaps the most terrifying truth is that through our own refusal to demand honesty and accountability, we are the ones inviting the wolves to dinner, setting their plates, and calling them family.